Association. So my expectation is to learn on issues energy. And if in case I have to advise the president, I'll recommend that he need to bring some order in the capital city of Nairobi, because UNEP, the UN staff in UNEP Gigiri brings about, is it 500 million per month in this country? The money is spent in Ruaka, village market, Two Rivers area. They fear coming to the city because of the hawkers and the borders. So once this money comes to the city, at least Nairobians will have money. There'll be some cash flow. Yes.
Interesting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Ngaroya from Chomoka Studios. Well, my expectation here is to also learn and know and gain knowledge on my role as a Kenyan, and how I can assist, how I can provide assistance to make changes, make impact in the energy sector also. And if I was a president for a day, I would I would give the opportunity for children to become leaders, so we can groom them for the future, and we can also learn from them, because their raw creativity and curiosity can give us insights on what to do next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beryl Muga from Chomoka Studios. My expectations for today are to broaden my perspective on matters energy and to learn as much as I can from this forum. If I was a president for a day, I would make things more affordable for the common citizen and be more reasonable about taxing, so that the common wananchi is not hurt economic-wise. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Abigail Rugendo from ECAS Institute. I mostly do research on environment and climate change, and also an urban planner. So today I just want to learn the different challenges like every sector is experiencing on energy, like for youth, for women, professionals, yeah. And if I was president for one day, maybe close the borders and we see what we can do as a country before we involve other people. Yeah.
Well, good morning. My name is Simon from YALI, Alumni Chapter of Kenya. I'm looking forward to engaging more on the conversation on energy and how it relates to climate change. If I were president for one day, I'll focus on policy to ensure that the policy we set for that particular day will be able to shape our engagement and interventions in the matters energy and climate change. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I'm Melissa. I'm a journalist from Kenya Leo. I'm expecting to learn and interact more on matters energy. And if I was a president for a day, I would ensure that the prices of food and everything that the common mwananchi is suffering from right now is reduced, so that at least they can be able to afford such as unga and everything. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Calvin Rock. I'm a reporter at Africa Uncensored. Well, my expectation is to learn, to network, to get to augment my knowledge on the energy sector, and perhaps get an idea or two on how to better report on science stories. If I were president for a day, well, I'd give the youth jobs. All those people who are jobless, I'd make sure they get jobs, well-paying jobs. And those who have jobs, your salaries will be doubled. Yeah.
Can we vote you in tomorrow?
Please do. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clive Donnelly. I am from Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. I work as a climate policy advisor, and I'm also a negotiator on loss and damage. One thing, what I expect today is gaining more insightful ideas on just energy transition, and also gaining more insight that, can form a comprehensive action agenda that, can enhance clean energy transition within the African perspective and agenda. And one thing that I'd do as a president, I'd pay people to ditch their cars and also enhance more public transport. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mosenda Jacob. I'm from Climate Clock as a media coordinator and communications. What I'm expecting from today is to learn ways in which gender mainstreaming can be integrated to accelerate energy transition and policies. And if I was a president today, I could accelerate the issues of energy transition to mitigate costs and also environmental impacts.
Good morning. I hope we've taken something, so at least when I say hi, at least I could hear the voices. Good morning. I'm Samuel Pere. I always avoid mentioning my middle name because it's hard, but it's Oltetia. Let me just say I'm a researcher on issues of clean energy and, clean, renewable, anything. I'm here to learn. Energy and clean energy and transitions, there's a lot that need to be learned because there's a lot that is not known. If I were president for a day, I would rethink the carbon credits auctioning that we are doing. We are headed to, another crisis, and it could be a new way we are being recolonized. Well, we don't know. So if I were president for a day, I would rethink that, at least up until we've known how much we need to be paid for the carbon credits. We have a cap. We know for every ton the local community can earn this. I would shun away from companies like Blue Carbon. I would tell them, please, let the communities earn whatever they're supposed to earn. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Crispus Onkoba, HI, and I'm a communication officer with the SID. If our president, is there anything I've missed for the day? To have a very indulging session, guys, to get to understand more of Kenya's energy and climate futures. Besides that, so my expectations for if I were president, probably I think I'll have better policies that are more attuned to my countrymen than external factors. Thank you.
My turn. Hi, everybody. So Pasi Amayo Ogola. I am program manager at the Society for International Development under the Energy, Climate, and Environmental Futures Program. expectations for the day, active participation. Obviously, these conversations are usually held in very closed doors more often than not. And I think it's time the public and any Kenyan can interact with the conversations on energy and climate change developments in the country and across. I think the other expectations is we have different expertise in the room, private sector, we have journalists, we have students, and everybody has a role to play. So I'm looking forward to being able to hear the concerns that we have in the room, but also solutions to those concerns as we're going in. And then if I was the president of Kenya, oh my gosh, it's a hard hat to wear. I think for me, I would invest one in education, and accessibility to education, especially on environmental issues. But also I would invest in really ensuring that there's access to electricity, especially for academic institutions, but also health institutions, especially those that are out of Nairobi. So bringing in the rural people to use renewable solutions to power access to medicine and healthcare, but also power education. Thanks.
Wow, thanks. I want also our support staff to introduce themselves. We want to know everyone in the room, so you're not left behind.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Simon Wango. Yeah.
Expectation for the day? Or if you were president for the day, what would you change or what would you do?
Well. I'll come to that later.
Okay.
Okay, good morning. I am Martin Durango, and I'm your videographer for the day.
You don't want to say anything if you are president? Okay. Your name?
Oh, hi, guys.
Hi.
My name is George Kamau. I'm the photographer for the day. My expectations is to take great photos with you people smiling.
Oh,
Great. If I was president for a day, I would listen to you people.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I like to have everyone introduce themselves so that we actually know each other. I know we might not retain all the names, but at least now we know what each other does. And the reason I asked about the being a president for the day, because that's a future you actually think that can actually be possible. And with this conversation that we are having today, we are looking at what possible futures can we look at in terms of having energy justice, having climate solutions that are possible, that can actually come out of the policies that we have, that the conversations that we are going to have today is going to look at the possible futures in energy and also in climate. So just to introduce the conversation, this forum is held by Society for International Development in partnership with Heinrich Böll Foundation and in collaboration with Strathmore University, the Strathmore Energy Research Center. So to start the conversation and to start our program, I want to introduce Percy Amayo, who is a program manager for Sustainable Energy Futures, who is going to start a program and just give an idea of what Society for International Development and the Sustainable Energy Futures program is about, and then take us to the next item on the program. Percy, the floor is yours.
Before, we have Halima and Peter on Zoom. So I was wondering whether they can introduce themselves. Halima, can you hear me? And Peter, maybe we'll start with you, Halima. Halima, I think you're on mute. So I can hear you, but from a distance. Okay. What about Peter? So can you try? but I can hear him, so that's very little. So we are working on the sound in the room, but we'll come back to you so that you can introduce yourself. And but for now, those of us who are joining on Zoom, I've seen you, Gilbert. Introduce yourself on the chat box, and then we'll continue. But for now, I want to do just a brief introduction of who is here, who's convening, but also give some remarks from our partners before we start. So it would have been nice if we had a desk here, but we don't. So I'm going to do a presentation. So just give me a second to put it up, and then we'll go. I think you can see the screen now. Great. So I'm being told that you can now introduce yourself. Halima, do you want to go for it? Just tell us your name, your organization, and your expectations for the day. So Halima, we do see you unmuted, but unfortunately, we cannot hear you in the room. So we'll try again later. Okay, we'll just proceed, but we'll introduce later. Sorry, Halima, we're having sound issues, but we're working on it. If you're on Zoom and you want to speak, just make sure that you're connected to the audio and that you can hear us, but we'll try again soon. So I'll just quickly move us forward, but we'll work on that so that you can join us for the forum. So this project is called the Sustainable Energy Futures Program. It's been at SID since 2016. And we wanted to do this project for two reasons. We really did not understand what was happening in the energy sector, especially in relations to sustainable and international development. So, you know, we have SDG 7 as part of the SDGs, and then we have SDG 13. So we really wanted to look at the regional context, and we wanted to start with East Africa, with a focus on Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And we wanted to weave in a community of practice, or what we like to call an impact network, to describe the conditions today and the things that are influencing the energy sector in East Africa. But for today, we're going to be focusing on Kenya. And then we wanted to bring the same community of practice. And when I say community of practice, is people like you in the room. So people who are working in the energy sector, but also private sector, civil society, academia, and other sectors, and how they think about, you know, the future of the energy systems in the country and in East Africa. But these stories of the future, we wanted them not just to be imaginary fictional stories. We wanted them to be stories of the future that are relevant, challenging, and plausible. So things that, and you're going to see the stories today. So we wanted to bring out those things that, you know, might happen and that you can relate to and have conversations on, but not just for the purpose of understanding, but also finding solutions to us being able to achieve or create or shape a desirable energy system in the face of the climate crisis. Why did we want to do this? Really quickly, we wanted to have a clear understanding of what might take place with the energy system and the kind of things that we need to do to respond to those things. So I had a lot of people saying, I'm here to learn, I'm here to know how I can tell better stories in my climate desk and things like that. So we wanted to have that clear understanding, but then we also wanted to prepare the population for a future that we might have to face, especially in terms of energy and the climate crisis, but also wanted to provoke policy dialogues and to create spaces for new conversations. So this is just one of those spaces, and we'll be having more and more of this. And hopefully in spaces where it's accessible for everybody to be able to join and contribute. We use a tool called Scenarios. And the reason why we use Scenarios is we have 4 reasons why we use Scenarios. So one, to help us to build and shape mental models that allow us to understand the things that are unraveling in the energy sector and in the context of the climate crisis, but also what assumptions are we making in the face of uncertainty. When I say uncertainty, we never know when a natural disaster is going to come. Just recently, we had conversations about El Nino, and then there was conversations about El Nino is not happening. And then we had somewhere that, oh, anybody who predicts there's going to be an El Nino will be fined. So I don't know if you guys had those things, but how do you make a call on something that is very uncertain? So you don't know whether it's going to come or not, but you still need to prepare in case it comes. So this is why we use scenarios. We also wanted to have tools that we could use for larger strategic planning with actors such as yourself, but including policymakers who we meet in different forums. And also we wanted to have strategic conversation that can lead to better decision making. I'm going to skip all this because we're going to screen the stories and we're going to hear them. But I think as you're watching the stories later on, and it's so sad that that thing is there. Let me see if I can take it out. So you can see the stories that we'll be screening today. Okay, it's not me, Chris, it's you, I think. We'll be screening today. We published them in 2018. So that's when we did them. And we wanted to know where East Africa's energy system will be by 2050. So when you're watching the stories today, think about where might Kenya's energy system be by the year 2050. The analysis that we did is shown here. So one, we saw that we're dominantly using biomass. You'll see it, especially at the domestic level and in rural areas. So we said we are stuck in the 19th century. We're stuck in the 19th century, yet we're making 20th century investments in the energy sector. So your oil, your coal, your gas, your hydro, those are 20th century investments in the energy sector. Then obviously we are confronted with a world of limits. And one of those is climate change. But Iman is going to do the picture of now and broaden that for us later on. And then I don't know if it's just us, but sometimes there's a failure of politics, right? Some might say we're trying to improve it with all the integrated energy policies and climate change action plans. We'll get to that. But that was the perception in 2018. And then obviously there's a rising demand for energy. People want to cook, people want to light their homes, people want to heat, people want to air condition. So there's a lot of demand, rising demand for energy and electricity in all its forms. But then now, in 2018, conversations around climate change were not as massive as they are now. Like everything now is climate change. So we had climate change kind of confronting us as well. And the questions that we had set are, what energy systems will we see in East Africa, but for today in Kenya? And what will be the consequences for Kenyans and the environment? So those are the two questions that I want you to keep in mind as we screen today and as we have the conversations today. And then I want to just close by saying the stories will be screened. These are the three stories that we'll be seeing today. One is Mitumba. The second one is markets. The third one is struggles. Mitumba, kila mtu anajua what Mitumba means, right? Second-hand clothes in Kenya, or anything that is second-hand. So in the context of this, we used it to describe second-hand technologies that were mainly developed by the West, and then now we've borrowed them and we use them here. And then markets is really a lot of the things we are talking about today: carbon initiatives, carbon trading, and carbon credits, and all that kind of stuff. So in this story, we're going to be looking at how the global climate emergency is forcing a rapid transition to clean energy. And then the third one is struggles, which is a story of hard times, big changes in small places. One of my favorite stories, but you'll decide which one is your favorite. So those are the films that we'll be screening today and having a conversation around. I want to close this very long opening remarks by saying our partners are not in the room. Our main partners, Heinrich Böll Foundation, we've been working with them since the year 2016. And they're really the people who allowed us to do the scenarios research, the animations, and now we continue to hold these conversations in different parts of the country. I must say that this project is extending to Africa. So we will be doing scenarios for Southern Africa from 2024. So look out for that. If you're a journalist who reports for the Africa desk, might be a very interesting project to dive into. So they send their remarks. But for today, we have a special partner, which is the Strathmore University, that are also here, the Energy Research Center. So they will be speaking to us on the role of education. And with that, I open this segment. And to start it off, Dauphin, I'm going to ask you to come up to just provoke us to think about certain issues in our country as we go into screening our first film for today, which is The Picture of Now. And then Iman will take over after you.
Thank you. Good morning again. How many have ever lived in a single rooms? Ile ploti is 30, 50 houses, and especially now, you know, with tokens and everything. And you have the unfortunate lack of living in a house yenye the meter box iko hapo nje, you know, like iko na hizo token, you know, gadgets ka zote hapo za house zote. Alafu you know, it's single rooms. These are people who are paying like 3K to, you know, maybe 5K a month. So they're not exactly people who buy 50 units of token. So and I don't know if it's still the same, but I remember there's a time when if you have anything below 30 units, those gadgets are like ticking all the time, you know. So you can imagine like you know, 30 token gadgets, you know, like beeping outside your door, and somehow you have to live with that. And I think so when you think about energy, and you look at instances like those, you know, where, so this is somebody, you know, who's living, you know, they're struggling to pay that for units. At the same time, within that single room, they have to make their food, you know, they have to make their drinks, you know, maybe wanatumia an electric kettle kuheat maji, wako na meko yao wanapika, wakati anataka kupiga githeri labda atanunua makaa. But siku hizi I think there's some green solutions. Here people are using methanol to, you know, boil their whatever. There's some gadgets. So but I think for me when I think about energy, like those are some of the images that come to mind. But at the same time, you cannot speak of energy and not think about climate change, you know, because I think our need for energy has brought so much of the changes, like that has happened in the climate and around us. And so this was me trying to understand, like trying to ask myself was what if climate change was a human being, was a person, like, you know, what would they have to say? So behold, a dusk without dawn, a storm with no calm, a fire that rages on. That's me. I am the rains that never came, the seeds that never grew, the crops that failed. I am the countless cattle carcasses and the bare granary floors. I am the starving bodies of children in northeastern Kenya and the vulture hovering to pick their dried up flesh from their juvenile bones. I am the tears of mothers lost in grief and the fear that never stops. I am the famine, the drought, the heat wave, the melting roads of Valsad, India. I am the choking skies struggling for the next breath and the whipping clouds in an outburst. I am the hurricane, the tsunami, the typhoon, the earthquake, the cyclone. I am the melting ice in the polar north and the perennial floods in Budalangi. I am disaster, an ever impending catastrophe, disaster. Who am I? I am the deserted marketplaces, the empty shelves, the food prices in the skyrocket. I am the truth in your empty pockets and the lies from your politicians' mouth. Hell, I am the propaganda minister. I am as mysterious as I am sinister. Call me trouble. When I move, the old earth trembles. When I shake, entire cities crumble. It's no wonder I am the talk of town. As a matter of fact, scratch that. I am a global conversation. I am the president's speech in the room in your local bar. I am the gossip item, the prayer item. Your parish priest is in pilgrimage, praying to stop me. I am a star. The devil knows my name. As a matter of fact, to some, the devil is my name. I am the wrath of the gods, the ghost of 1984 in Korem, Ethiopia. I am the protests, the emergency meetings, the food drives, the seminars, the conferences, international conventions have been held in my name. Poems have been written, songs composed, pictures taken, paintings drawn. I am a hot theme in film. I've inspired documentaries, TV shows, and blockbusters. Can't you see? Somewhere today, there's yet another event about me. And this is still another poem about me. I really am a big deal. I'm in your newspaper headlines and your prime news bulletins. I am the hot debate, the scientific puzzle, a cautionary tale, a warning. I am the last cock crowing before morning, or maybe not. I'm a tumor, a malignant one, a terminal disease. My name is, well, you can go on and fill that in for yourself because you are the cause of the cancer. I am the only question in your final exam, and your next action is the answer. Your next action is the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolphin. I hope that has given us inspiration to think. And yes, as I said, climate change is the hot debate and the thing that we're all talking about these days. So I want to invite my co-moderator for the day. We're going to go straight into the first screening of the day. So as Iman Bashir is coming up, I'm going to check with our tech that we're ready for the first film of the day. But as they're setting that up, Iman, this is your segment. So I wonder if you want to set some context, expectations, and then we'll go ahead.
Thank you, Pasi, and thank you for the word. Hello, everyone. Hello. So my name is Iman, and my job here today. I'll invite each and every one of you to say something. You'll all have a chance to speak. You'll all have a chance to contribute. And so don't be surprised if I cold call on each and every one of you to say something. Please feel free to say your words, speak your truth, speak your perspectives. Let us know what is going on in your industry, in your sector, in the niche part that you play within the energy systems in Kenya. So I think we're good to go now. We're ready? Okay, we'll get started and then I'll come back to have the conversation around this video. So please pay attention and enjoy.
which need a lot of money and leaves us with bigger debts. But the 21st century is full of limits. Everyone wants more energy for basic needs and a better life. However, population growth and our chosen development models have led to a decline of natural resources as land, water, and clean air are harder to find. We need a global energy transition that slows climate change, restores the natural world, and improves lives. So what might this energy transition look like in Eastern Africa? Here are 3 stories of what might happen in the next 30 years.
Thank you for that. So that's a quick outline of where we are now at in terms of energy issues. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the visual of, the animals around the river dying, the river drying up, everything essentially having to go into destruction for us to meet our energy needs. So the first thing I want to bring up is that illusion of choice. Do we have to choose between meeting our energy needs and addressing our energy needs as Kenyans, or do we have to exchange that for the current nature that we have around us and these biosystems that we rely on for our day-to-day? So I think before I start calling on people, do we have someone who wants to say something on that system of choice that Kenyans are having to pick? We're at a crossroads. Do we have to choose? And if we do you have something to say on this? Do I need to start calling on people? Just put up your hand. Pasi will bring around a microphone just to set us off. General words in terms of nature versus energy systems. Thank you, Samuel, for volunteering kindly. Go ahead and speak, please.
In a position to address our energy, you said?
So in the picture of now, we saw that for us to meet our energy needs, we had to compromise nature and rivers and water and animals and plants. What do you have to say on that? Coming from Narok County, directly living in contact with nature. Go ahead.
There's a very big challenge. One, because if we chose to change, we have the options. And when I always remember something interesting when they brought about these issues of development and everything, they said the success of development is when humanity has choices. But at the stage we have 0 choices. Because if you go to the local, I think for the last 1 week, I've been in Homa Bay. And when we traced, in some of the, local areas, when you trace, the value chain of fish, for example, they get the fish, after that, the women have to take the fish and dry and fry and then sell. Now, that is a whole value chain. So one of the questions we asked is, what energy source are you using in the drying and in the frying? Interesting. All of them are natural. One is better because in the drying, they use, solar, they use the sun. But then when it comes to frying, they'll have to fetch firewood. And the firewood they fetch is in a reserved area. So they risk going to get the firewood. When they get the firewood, they use almost 10 bundles to do the frying. So we asked them a question. Why don't you look for alternatives? Because you are destroying your forest. Are you aware? They said, yes, we are aware, but we have a choice. So I think one of the challenges is, how is our human dignity? Do we have choices? If you go to the village, they really wish to stop going to fetch the firewood. It's risky. It is, a very long process. Women will not have a chance to, do other, home or any other activity. But then the question they would always ask you, do we have a choice? So the issue of choice is what is eating into our human dignity. Do we have a choice? We don't. So at times you really want to help. You really want to conserve these resources, but they always ask you a very good question. Do we have a choice? They don't have a choice. So that is, I think, it is something that we have to ask ourselves. It is a balance between survival and, survival of humanity and survival of the natural resources. But then the long-term question should be, if we destroy the nature, will our own survival be stable?
Thank you so much for that. You said the optimum state of development is when you have choice. Amazing. And with that, I think you have something to add. Please go ahead.
Okay. To add on that, let's take this context to the village perspective. Let's take it out of town. I come from the village where currently to this century, people still depend on firewood. Why? One is a distribution of electricity. You get that till this century, a village of over 2,000 residents are depending on firewood for lighting, for cooking, charcoal for cooking, and anything else. Why? Who do we blame on this? Currently, you'll find that an area that was forested in the year 2009, currently it is a farming region. No trees found around. Where are the trees? They have been converted to sources of energy. Where will it be in the next, by 2029, 20 years later? I think the distribution of electricity and also maybe some costs. Looking for an alternative, let me say like solar energy, accessibility, and also reliability. Some regions are cold, they do not experience sun as some parts of the country. Two, I'll talk in terms of reliability of electricity too, because some of them opt into issues of degrading the environment in terms of cutting down of forests because of reliability. Let's say Kenya doesn't depend fully 100% in power generation. You see, some parts of the country, last week I was in Marsabit. They have electricity, but for the last 4 weeks, that's 1 month, they have not been having power. The sites of Isiolo, the sites of Samburu, that line of the northeastern. So what do they depend on? They shift to other alternatives of energy. Hoteliers, they depend on charcoal for lighting and cooking and so on. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And I think both of them have brought out a very important issue, the externalities around gender and how women and girls are affected by gender issues, and how when they need to go further and further in search of firewood, and they need to leave their homes earlier and earlier and come home later and later, trying to get this biomass for cooking and cleaning. And when they're and when they're cooking it and when they're using it to cook, they are getting, respiratory problems. So women and girls are facing bigger challenges when it comes to the energy crisis as opposed to the rest of the population. And I know Abby has a lot of research around gender issues in the energy system. So if you have something to add, please go ahead.
I think for energy, mostly for gender, I think there's not much like empowerment, because like when we say at the household level, the women are doing the most work and even going to get the firewood, and it connects with security and even how they raise their own family and children, because now you'll have to leave your children behind to go look for these things. And then the state of security now, it really affects the gender balance at home, because also you won't find in these communities men fighting for women rights and protection. So it's really a big gap. And I don't know how to, maybe if we could like just come together, because you see the gap is even in the household level where the head of the house and the, like for example, let me use like the pastoral communities. When the men go with the cattle for pastoralism, and then the women are left behind. But in most communities also you'll find the women will keep the goats and they'll also have to do the household works. So it really leaves behind the children being vulnerable and then the risk of women. But when even women are attacked in the field, there's no like where you can go and tell the wazee that you are attacked, because you don't have rights in that area or protection. So that's a big problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Abby, for bringing out those layers. And as soon as Abby said pastoralist communities, Malim's hand went right up. Go ahead, Malim.
Thank you. I think you wanted us to talk and we'll talk. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Yes. I think there are two more very important questions here. How can we transit from 19th century to 21st century? Do we have a choice? And also my area where I came from, it has been mentioned several, from the artist to the colleagues in the room. So I said, why am I keeping silent and people are talking about us? So first, do we have a choice? No, we don't have a choice. I think the issue of energy is affected by poverty. Poverty and energy, how can they go together? Do you have a choice to avoid firewood? Do you have a choice to avoid the charcoal? What other alternative can you use? Imagine yourself, you're in a village, your husband with polygamy family, you have a family, you have more than 10 kids to feed. You have no any other source of income. So the wife and the children are sitting there, and you have the energy and you have the tools to cut down an acacia tree and to burn it and make it charcoal. No matter the policies we keep, no matter the forest guys or the soldiers who are standing on the road that are, trying to reduce, any cow who is carrying a large charcoal of gunia, zile zimejaa makaa mingi wanashika, but at the end of the day, that's not the solution. The solution is the grassroots, is the village. So as we speak now, where is the El Nino happening in this country? Which parts are mostly affected in this country as we speak now? That's the Northeastern. When you are talking about the drought, which area is it affected mostly? It is the Northeastern. So drought, they are mostly affected. Floods mostly affected. But at least even the decision and the capacity building and training, they normally happen in Nairobi, not at the village level. They don't know what's going on. Some of them, they don't know the animal called climate change. I think the artists need to go there and explain to it like the way he did now. Maybe they can understand. So we don't have the choice. We are, because of the poverty, and we are the most affected people. So maybe what can be done is to empower the people at the village level, those guys who are cutting down the trees, to be given uniforms so that they can take care of the trees. At least they be given some job to sustain their family and to avoid the future generation coming up, so they cannot harm the forest. Because the class 8 are dropping out, they are cutting down the trees, charcoal, wanauza gunia, ndio wanunue smartphone, simu, waingie TikTok for leisure. Wengine they are doing it for survival, ndio wapeleke mtu hospitali, mtoto apeleke shule. Hiyo miti kukata ndio source of income. In the next 10 years, 20 years, hatapata ile miti ya kukata. So what is the solution if we will not found the tree to cut down in the next 20 years? Where will his children feed from? Because they also want to inherit from the father cutting down the trees. How long should we cut them? What is the solution to that? Thank you.
Thank you for bringing out those interconnected layers. It's not just a one-off issue. There's layers and complexities within the issue. And I do have a queue forming. Now people are getting more warmed up. So we'll have Abby, then Calvin next. Go ahead, Abby, intervene, and then Calvin can go after.
This might sound a bit controversial, but I think we do have we do have the option of choice, but accessibility could be the problem because do we have access to information, access to finance, access to mostly, yeah, information and finance. Like for us, when we talk about the city, not just going to the villages, we know about electric vehicles, we know about other clean cooking options, but how accessible are they? Because like, for example, if you want an electric bike, to import it, it's 195,000. The normal bike is 70,000. So even access to the finances to get the cleaner option, it's not supporting the conversion to other energy options. Yeah.
Thank you for making it even more complex. If you can't access the choices, do you even have a choice? Thank you for bringing that up. Think about that. She said, problem may not be that you don't have a choice, you just can't access the choice. And my question is, if you can't access the choice, do you really have it? So just ponder on that for a few minutes. Thank you so much, Abby. Calvin, go ahead.
Well, in my opinion, we do have a choice and we've already made the choice. I'd like to believe that it's not wrong to cut down trees. It's not even wrong to use firewood or charcoal. Nature, for those who believe in creation, was meant to be self-sustainable. Look at the wild. Things work out. Prey, predator, symbiotic relationships, parasitic relationships, and nature thrives. The problem is that we've tipped the balance. When we invented vehicles, when we invented factories, when we invented plastic, we tipped the balance. We're making a choice. So what we're doing now is trying to treat symptoms of a choice we made. We're not looking at the cause of these things that are happening. What is wrong with the normal bike? We don't need an electric vehicle. We don't need an electric bike. I don't want to dispute civilization, but I like to think of it that human laziness has caused so much, has played a big part in tipping the balance I'm talking about. We always want solutions to things, the easiest available solutions, which more often than not are detrimental to nature, to the environment. For instance, plastic. When you think about it critically, we don't really need plastic at all. Maybe in the olden days, people would weave baskets from reeds and use them as to carry things. People had ways of containing stuff without needing plastics, and they managed just fine. Well, I'm not saying it's bad, all these things, inventions we've made, but we're over-exploiting the resources we have at the expense of what was supposed to be natural. So we can all get energy sustainably, but we're overdoing it. Look at the oil companies, they're overdoing it. Look at maybe manufacturing, they're overdoing it. We don't think anymore about the balance that's supposed to be there. So that is really the problem. It's a symptom, but it's not the disease itself. So that's what I think.
Thank you so much. And we have a huge representation of media in the room, and we've had from Calvin and Mariam. Maybe I want to switch lanes a bit so that we can have a more diverse representation. And I want to invite the academia representation in the room to speak to us about what the disconnect is between what we're doing and what we need to do. Because on paper, I think Kenya has some of the most progressive laws in terms of the energy system. We do know what we need to do. We've written it down. The problem is implementation. We have, documents that, like the INEP, that are seeking to harmonize all the existing regulations around energy issues. But in reality, there's still cropping up of some investments in fossil fuels and things that other countries are moving away from, we're moving towards. So maybe I can invite Strathmore to say some few words. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for this chance. I would like to start by first of all saying that yes, choices are needed. Yes, we have choices. Each and everyone has their own choice. And then another thing, I will try and look back in the 19th century, as most of the people have quoted, and also in the 21st century. If you look at the CO2 emissions curve from the 19th century, it's actually lower than what we have now. And this is due to technological changes, right? So the biggest question is, would you rather move from the 19th century or remain in the 19th century? Then try and correct what you have already done wrong in the technological aspects and also the technological aspects. Yeah, so the role of, I had some few notes here with me. So the role of academia in trying to bring the conversation of energy transition is quite large. The first one is R&D. Of course, we from the Paris Agreement, we know our levels where we need to cap our global rise in temperature. So the role of R&D and academia in that is, number one, to ensure that we have we conduct researches in the renewable energy and also the technological aspects of different sustainable transport technologies, sustainable development technologies, because these technologies are the drivers for economic growth, right? Yeah. The other thing is we can look at our education programs and education curriculums. In Strathmore, we're already working on modeling the future energy systems through which is guided by what you've just said, the INEP process, where we don't look at the power sector alone, because if you're looking at the global CO2 emissions curve, the biggest emitter, yes, it's energy of CO2, but there are other sectors like transport, agriculture, they also contribute. So it's necessary for us to think in a wholesome way on how we actually try and reduce the CO2 emissions in all these sectors. Then we can develop innovative solutions. By innovative solutions, it means we just don't think about the normal things, then how we normally operate. These are like things like solar and other renewable technologies. Of course, Kenya, we have 93% of our grid, which is renewable. Our target is to reach 100% by 2030. So how do we actually get there? Which technologies? Remember, when you're also looking at solar, the lifetime of a solar panel is 25 to 30 years. What happens after that 25 years? What really happens? If you're talking about wind, what is the degradation factor and what is the impact on the capacity factors of those technologies in the long run? So therefore, we need to think about other energy carriers that we can think of in the sustainable development. One of these energy carriers that we can think of is hydrogen. It's sparring a lot of global interest, and we recently launched National Green Hydrogen Strategy for Kenya. Does it have a role in our energy system? Yes. Policy support is also another critical thing. Because the insights we get from our researchers, it's what will inform decisions from the different maybe industry and also policymakers. Then one other role is collaboration with the industry. Our role is to train individuals, and then after they are trained, they are capable to go and do whatever is pertaining to what they have learned. Then also conducting public awareness, as he mentioned, we need to do that because it's imperative that when you're talking about just transition, it means we need to be all collectively be focused on the transition to the other level. Then the other factor is like training future leaders, like, training the next generation on these consequences of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for mentioning the interconnectedness of the different sectors and how each person has a role to play. And we've heard from media, we've heard from academia, we've heard from CSOs and, researchers. And maybe just to invite one more party in the energy system to make sure that we hear from them. We have Clive from the international space, the donor institutions, our our supporters and our friends, please go ahead. Can you talk about the concerns and the major things in your industry when it comes to the energy sector in Kenya and what role the international space has to play within the system?
Yes, thank you. So apparently, I believe that we all agree that Africans' emissions are negligible. We have only 4% of emissions, but we are still the same people who experience the drastic impacts of climate change. And just before, just leveraging on the conversation, a third percent of the global population, which is really need advancement of clean cooking energy. This is like 2.3 billion people in the world. They still depend on the rudimentary cooking systems, which is mostly based in the global south, and this is and Kenya, we're part of the global south. And so basically, I believe that international and multilateral development must help in bridging the gap. Our colleague here was saying, do we really have the choice? We do not really have much choice to choose on because the communities and the grassroots, they do not have really much choice, because when you talk about getting maybe a clean cooking stove, which apparently they need to fund an upfront of clean cooking choice of stoves, which ranges from 1/3 of the monthly income. So you can't basically fund a third of your monthly income just to get cooking, yet you do not have food to cook. And so basically, the international system has a clear role to play majorly in funding the clean cooking advancement. And basically, when we, in African perspective, we find that women and girls, they experience more devastating impacts from climate change, from the cooking, the smoke that comes from within the rudimentary cooking systems. And therefore, I believe that we need to put more pressure on international systems. And also our local governments, they also have a choice for us in terms of balancing the affordability of the clean cooking system and majorly the subsidization of the clean cooking, so that these local communities can advance collectively in clean energy transitioning. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Clive, and thank you everyone for representing your industry. We've heard about the role of academia when it comes to the energy system as, providing research, R&D, providing training, ensuring that there's a healthy knowledge base when it comes to energy issues. The international space acting as a bridge, ensuring there's resources, ensuring there's adequate support for the grassroots level entrepreneurs and grassroots level advancements when it comes to the energy transition. We've heard about academia in terms of talking about the externalities and those who are usually left out of the energy system, such as women and youth and young girls. And we've heard from CSOs who told us that their role is to ensure that people have resources when it comes to carrying out the energy transition. And all of this was rooted under the statement, do we really have a choice? And can we access this choice? So please continue thinking about that as we go on to the next stage with Pasi. And thank you all so much for being active, for being engaged, and for representing the various industries in the room. Thank you so much. Welcome, Pasi.
Great. Thank you, Iman. You can keep that. That's yours. So we're going to screen the next animation. It's called Mitumba, secondhand clothes. But in this context, it's secondhand energy systems that we've borrowed from other countries. So as you're watching the screening, please do take notes, highlight the issues or concerns that are coming out, and then we'll have a dialogue after that. So Mitumba. So as we wait for the audio, okay, we're on.
We were such opposites. Why do you waste your breath in these protests? To develop like the Asian giants or the West, we need a lot of energy. There's no shame in adopting secondhand energy technologies since we will produce shoes, clothes, and other things here and sell them worldwide.
But times have changed. What Asia or other regions did, we cannot do now because the world won't allow it. The climate won't, the trade barons won't, and the robots won't. And what about the effect on natural habitats? That's irreversible. Can't you see?
Who cares if the grey parrot becomes extinct? It never fed anyone. People need jobs now.
And as usual, we would agree to disagree. I'm a teacher and an activist. He's an economist. We saw the world differently. It was the year 2020. My partners and I were ready to change our region's energy policies that rode on political power and money. We tried to bring change through peaceful protests, international press, and social media, but our governments responded aggressively. In the end, we had no choice. I was among the last to give in. Then my boyfriend asked,
So, will you marry me now?
Yes. As I prepared for our wedding, I followed the energy news, watching as our governments agreed to one bad deal after another. As usual, my husband saw no problem with this.
Now we are on the right path. Coal and oil are cheap, and adopting them will give us energy independence. Hydro is well established and has no greenhouse emissions, and we know how to control the risks.
Unless you count the concrete used and the way...
If it works, who cares? Having a centralized energy pool means more power for the region's cities, which are growing faster than the rural areas.
But these older technologies are only bought because they cost more than multiple small renewable systems, which suit our people scattered in rural areas. In the end, you can't be fighting all the time. Little by little, we settled into the routines of children, home, family, and work. Connection of urban households to the electricity grid ramped up, along with repeated scandals on pricing. In the slums, I noticed more tapping into the main lines. Did authorities receive kickbacks to look the other way? Maybe, maybe not. I have to admit, urban energy was better. Charcoal use in the cities reduced and some forest areas were recovering. However, rural areas and city slums were suffering. Where large projects were built, people were forced to move or left because life was too hard. The focus was on industry and urban areas, not rural agriculture. I remember the region's grand gala of 2030, when the last link of the Eastern Africa power pool was actualized. Then we were exporting oil and manufacturing grew rapidly. Despite my earlier doubts, people are getting jobs and lives are getting better.
See? The great development dream is working.
By the end of the 2030s, would the dream turn out to be merely a mirage?
For a while there, things looked really good on the energy front.
I always feared it was too good to be true. When the deal makers planned their coal and oil projects, they forgot about climate change or assumed it would only be a problem much later. Instead, because our exports were produced using fossil fuels, they became more expensive to cover the global carbon tax. So people stopped buying our goods. We couldn't sell our oil either, as many countries made a quick switch to electric and hybrid vehicles. Our manufacturing industries could not compete with the robotic factories abroad. We just hadn't kept up technologically. Many businesses shut down. Many people were unemployed. Crime rose in the cities until we rarely left our neighborhoods because of fear. Then there was the weather.
Bad policy is ruining farms in our region.
It's more than policy. The climate itself has become an enemy. In the countryside, it was hard to know when to sow or when to reap. Should farmers plan for drought or floods? It was hard to know. The swings between extremes were becoming more and more violent. Pollution was also increasing, especially around the factories where waste was being pumped into groundwater and streams. By the time our children were ready for university, the digital economy was the main employer and dominated by the youth.
Seems our energy investments are paying off, with the digital world being a heavy user of power.
True, but the carbon tax is forcing other businesses to close. And what about all the money we borrowed to pay for our dirty energy? How can we pay that back? As for hydropower, climate change, deforestation, haphazard rain, and silt have all reduced the power the dams gave us. Now we are dependent on Ethiopia's large dams for our electricity. That is very hard to handle. The international grid once brought the region together. Now we feel frustrated and resentful whenever the prices go up. A few days ago, I dug out my notes about small-scale distributed energy systems. Once, it was just an idea. Now, these systems are used worldwide. These energy systems would have created a more equitable society.
Are you sure you're not dreaming?
Perhaps I am. I hate the world around me. I hate being trapped in my middle-class neighborhood. I am surrounded by complacent people who believe they made their own success. I hate the bad policies, the energy systems we built in the 2020s, and the corruption we tolerated. We just got lucky in a rigged system. I've stopped arguing with my husband about this. We know each other too well now. My children, they mostly ignore me. Too comfortable to think deeply about anyone less fortunate. But I still whisper in the ears of my students. Resistance is an instinct that never goes away. One day, things will be forced to change because too many are suffering. Be ready for the next revolution.
Great. So that was the first scenario, Mitumba. And Etofan, are we sleeping? Okay. It's too bright. Great. So I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to just soak that in. And then we're going to do the round of conversations the way we've been doing. The online community, I can't see you, but I know you can hear me. So also for you, as you're listening in, have your questions or concerns, and we'll come to you shortly. I don't want to do a summary, but basically this was a future scenario where by 2050, we've invested in our oil, our coal, our hydropower plants, and we've seen the different things that took place or might take place, given that that's the trajectory we take with our energy system. And we've also seen the issues with climate. So I'm going to start us off. Who wants to start us off? What are some of the concerns and the issues that you are seeing? Clive, I'm seeing the microphone is like here, so I'm not sure whether that's an indicator that you want to go first. I want to check for volunteers first. Clive, do you want to dive into it? Do we have any activists in the room? Great. So you're going to take the mic first because the story was in the voice of an activist. What is your role? Then take it this way. What is your role as an activist in Kenya in highlighting some of these issues? Maandamano.
Yes, we agitate and then advocate for climate actions. I spearhead a movement on ecological activities whereby we are doing climate actions activities. Yes.
Tell us a little bit more. about the activities that you do in the context of getting us where we need to be? Because as an activist, you're advocating against something that might have a future implication. Tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, what we do, we reclaim and transform spaces and plant trees. Others are doing issues on waste management, whereby many of the groups are doing recycling. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll come back to you because I see you're avoiding really speaking. Maybe it's the title, activist. Academia in the house, or students. Samuel, you're in academia. Go for it, Jacob.
All right, thank you. I'm an activist too. So in these scenarios of activism or around issues pertaining climate change, energy transitions, we meet and discuss with mostly the marginalized communities, local organizations, CBOs, but most of them do ask. We have been seeing meetings all around, in and out, agreement signed as the clip suggested, but what are the actions that are being implemented towards this energy transition, clean, renewable energies? What is being done on this climate issue fund that is being signed and by different organizations, banks that are supporting climate change? Where is it acting on issues pertaining climate? Some of them do take this angle of thinking of protests. Youths go on streets to demand issues of climate change, ban pollution, but who is the cause of these issues? They ask, if we ban this, what will you use in return? How long will it take to transit to the renewable thing? The issues of maybe you suggest on ban plastic in your village, ban using plastic, sustainable agriculture, sustainable use of wood, cutting down of trees, cut and plant. But who is again following up on this? For how long will they use the plastic, or will they depend on plastics as they await for the next renewable source? And how is it costly? How cheaply again are they going to get it? Another one is vacations. As we push for the renewable energies, maybe we require a plant for maybe a charging station for maybe the buses or vehicles, a manufacturing industry. Who will be evacuated? It's the mwananchi, you see. So they think of the reciprocating of the issue to them again. They'll be evacuated from the place, and then what will happen thereafter? Nobody will be there. Another one, the last one, is job opportunities. As we transit also, there are more of the AI that is coming up. Many will lose jobs. Yes, some will be created, but most of them will lose again. So those are the questions that come from the ground again in issues pertaining climate change, also transitioning to renewable energies. Yeah.
I like that you touched on jobs, because that's really critical in the energy transition, immigration, and the role of digital transformation now and in the future. And you'll see another story that will capture that really intimately, so we'll get to see it more comprehensively. I want to take more voices in the room. And as Iman has said, we are going to be picking on people because we really want all the voices in the room to speak. Dofan, I see the mic on you, so I'm wondering whether that's an intervention.
Yeah. Okay, I think I don't like, for some reason, I don't like the word activism. So I never really consider myself as one, even though much of what I do can fall under that. But basically, as an artist, and I think as a young person, as a citizen of the world, basically, the way I see my role as an artist really is to humanize the conversation, right? Because and the reason why I love being part of these conversations is that I'm gaining more knowledge that I can that I can be able to put things in context in a way that more palatable too. Because these conversations can go on forever, but unless we find a way to really like make them relatable, then a lot of these conversations will always end within these walls or within certain circles, and then they will never get to the people. So for me, as an artist, I feel my role is to make people aware, right, of what's going on in a language they understand, right, in a language that makes sense to them. Because if I come and start quoting, carbon credits to them, like, it doesn't really make sense much. But if I come and show people how this is affecting their lives, for example, where I come from, there used to be rivers that, we are like at the slopes of Mount Kenya, there used to be rivers that used to flow. Most of those rivers don't even cross the tarmac anymore. Most of the riparian land has been converted to farmland, right? And the effects of that is that this year, at least now it's raining. But in the last 3 years, were really hard, were tough, because people planted and their crops just failed. And now the rains are quite serious. We are supposed to be harvesting maize right now. But the maize, because it's already dried up, the maize is spoiling in the farms, right? Because people can't go out to harvest. And even if they harvest, where are they going to put the crops anyway? So, and you see, these are the dynamics that people, once you paint that picture, then people can understand that it's like he was saying, it's about the balance. Because when we tip that balance, then it means, that shift is going to affect us. We are going to deal with extremes. So it's extreme drought and extreme rainfall. We need the sun as much as we need the rain, but we need it in balance, right? So for me, that's the role I feel I'm playing. And at the same time, also, making people aware. Because sometimes we let the government get away with so much. Yet at the same time, right now we're crying about the taxes, right? So somebody's gonna tell me, focus with the artistry, where just leave the politics. But how am I supposed to leave the politics alone, right? If who are these taxes affecting, right? If right now I go and board a matatu, it's going to reflect. If I go to shop in the supermarket, these days you're going to the supermarket with 1,000 bob. You can't even feel whatever you've shopped for, right? It's really like you've spent your 1,000 bob, but you can't even see how that reflects, right? So how am I supposed to, keep quiet when the government is, basically screwing us over, and it's affecting me? The policies of the day are affecting me, right? And so for me also, part of that is advocating for people to be involved in the policies, right? Because the government doesn't represent a few people, even though most of the policies they're passing on are benefiting a few people. The government is representing everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Dolphin.
When it was said academia, I think someone mentioned my name.
Yeah.
So maybe because of the research we engage a lot in. For the academia, and maybe just this issue of transition, because I think in the small film, you can see there are a lot of transitions happening. When we are here, we are discussing about development, and transiting to clean energy is part of the development. Questions, because academia always asks the questions that you have to ponder about, you have to think about, you have to write about, you have to, go think about. As we transit, are we equally transiting? Who is being left behind, and why are they being left behind? Question is, we were to discuss on issues of education and energy and transitions. A lot of Europe was among the first countries to undergo this transition. Actually, in some countries in, like Netherlands, you'll go and find a village that is self-sustaining. They are off-grid. they have produced their own energy, they consume, and they are okay. Question should be, who needs to learn what and when? Because if you look at some of the ways the transitions are being theorized, who needs to learn what? The communities needs to learn something. Whoever is bringing the technology needs to learn something. Whoever is going to implement needs to learn something. So as we are having all this conversation that energy is transiting, we are trying to move. Who needs to learn what, when?
Great. I love that. I want to diversify the voice in the room. And as I'm waiting for the next hand to shoot up, the reason why, great, I've seen the hand, Emily. The reason why we did the animations, and Chamoka is here, they'll speak because they were the partner we worked with to develop these scenarios, is because we wanted to do what Dauphin talked about. How do we include all actors, regardless of how small or how big they are, into the conversation and into the push? How can we translate these stories to reflect your ordinary life? That's why in these stories, you'll see there's a teacher, she's going to school, she's in a relationship, she has an economist, husband, and you see how it transitions. So, and education is a key role, because she was an educationist in the room. She was whispering in the voices of her students what also needs to be done. So how are we raising awareness? And I'm going to call on media on the next story, because that's about the media and the role of the media in this. But I'm going to take your comments, gentlemen. And I think I got your name, I memorized it, but it's Duncan, and then we'll hear from you, Ernest, next.
Yes. Yeah, I have two issues. Is it clear? Okay, I have two issues to raise. One is on policy, which had been discussed earlier. We tend to have good policy and laws in this country. One of them, as you are aware, sometimes back, the agreement was that it was enacted that every farmer must set aside 10% of the land on trees, where they can grow trees for their own consumption. And, that one was to help avoid encroaching into the forest and other public forest. But this is not taking place. I know it can't work in assholes where they're community land, but it can work in areas like in Western Kenya, Central, and part of Eastern. But now this is what is failing everything. And, it looks like policy making is all about making money at the time you are writing it, and you don't care about what takes place. For example, we needed extension officers to follow up with the people on this. At least then it will work so well, but there's nothing like extension officers following up on such issues. Then secondly, I come from Homa Bay, which my friend mentioned earlier, and oftentimes I go home twice in a month. The last time I was there was 2 weeks ago, and I just arrived. After 30 minutes, it started raining. Then less than 10 minutes, power was off, and it came back the following day at 4 p.m. So my thinking is we need to avoid a situation where the political class, work on projects, for example, ordering the connection of electricity in areas simply because for political publicity. For regions like, let's say, Western Kenya, along the lake region, Eastern Kenya, the Northeastern, I think we need to promote more of solar because it works. It can serve better than having the electric grid, which is not really serving well at times. So in cold places is where I think they need to intensify more providing electricity, from Kenya Power and Lightning. Yes, then finally, in your question, because I also double as media, is all about we need to create more awareness. We need to interact with people who work on the ground we need to interact with CID and other partners like researchers who are here. We need to get to know really what really do we talk about, because we can't be everywhere. Everybody's doing other things, but this is what we need to bring out all the time so that people can even know why they should not cut trees. People should know why they should plant trees at their home. Then they only cut the branches to use even for charcoal if they are under pressure. Yes.
I like that. Chomoka.
Just to add on, please. Sorry to interrupt. As my
No problem. Go ahead.
Yes, as my chair said, so some of our places, like if the electricity, if the pole falls down, to be corrected, return back, the MP has to be engaged. It takes several weeks for electricity to be restored. Unless the people go and cry and call the area MP, and he has to come and take pictures to fix the electricity back. So I think it's much popularized, and I would like to request you to engage the well resource and of the media. The KNCJ has, and the chair is here. I think you can talk later. Thank you.
Thank you, Malim. Emily, now I'll let you manage the floor. Okay, great. Can we give it to Ernest and then we'll come. Ernest.
Yeah. Hello, good afternoon. Here, my name is Ernest. I'm from Chomoka Studios. I'm here with my team. There is Roba. Yes, is Roba, and I have Beryl. We were behind Society of SID and HBS in creating the animations. It began, I think it was in 2020. I believe when we were just about to kick off the animations, that's when we had our health minister announce that we had the first COVID case. And things were tough from there. You can imagine creating all the 30, I think it's about 32 minutes of animation for close to 1.5 years during the COVID period. It was a tough time, but again, it allowed us to actually acknowledge that there is a problem in this country. And over time, I've been seeing, not just the country, but also the region, but over time, we've been seeing these scenarios unfold in front of our eyes. And it's strange because we have the second 20th century energy systems that are just being commissioned all over the place. And it's something that actually, when I read this book, I was like, my team and I were like, are these things really going to happen? But now we are seeing the prediction slowly by slowly. I don't mean to burst your bubble, but I think we were given a holiday and it had something tied to this on Monday. And just reflecting from that, we need to voice out a lot of these issues and concern through art, as we were given the opportunity to do through animation, and also through whatever medium that we can, so that we push these scenarios, people to be able to know that these things actually happen. And pushing that agenda forward, that's how we are going to have a lot of capacity building. People know about this. People know why is the government going to China to sign this deal and set up a factory here? Why are people calling for more factories to be set here? Can we just continue importing stuff and continue producing? And when those factories set up here, what energy will they be using? So those are the things that we need to look at and think critically by looking at these scenarios. Actually, they're predicting a lot. I don't want to preempt what you're going to watch next, but I hope it's going to give you some idea and things.
Yeah.
I don't know if my team wants to say something or.
No, don't worry,
Okay.
they'll get their chance.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna take one more because we wanna screen the next one. And Iman is beginning to come in with really nice big eyes. So I'll move quickly. I'm gonna take one more, but I just want to highlight some of the things that were coming out because I'm not really hearing them in the conversation. But the task to you was, what are the concerns and issues coming out, and what are the solutions, but also focusing on you as an actor. And this story was really focusing on the push for big energy projects in East Africa, so in our case, Kenya. And I would just want us to think, as we're moving into the next one, and I'll call one last person to speak, what's happening with the oil in Turkana? Is that something that we're still hoping for to extract and to use to power development in this country, or no? These are questions that are still lingering. What happened to the Lamu Coal project? We know we had the court case and it was thrown, it was kind of stalled. But what is the future of that? We're seeing a lot of nuclear conversations. We have a very profound nuclear board that is serious about taking on nuclear project power plant in Kilifi. That's huge, that's massive. How are we thinking about the future of that as Kenyans, and how are we preparing for such a future that's going to be powered by these things? Obviously, we had protests for a while, not just in Kenya, but around the world. And the activists in the room have spoken. So I'll leave it at that. We've seen a lot of, in this story, we're not saying this is the case for Kenya. I don't want to be beheaded. But we've seen that there's seemingly a failure in politics and private sector. And I'm going to put it together because the story really shows how, and somebody said it here, the policy always seems to be targeted at making money. And so you have this gentleman here who's half and half. And then obviously the role of the foreign investments who are like, hey, you guys, we can make you rich. And that's really what it takes for us to receive development, which in this picture is depicted in a suitcase. These are the issues that I'm hoping we can take out of this fictional story and relate them to Kenya. But there is somebody said in the room that in his county, I think it was Umalim, when the lights go out, the MP is called. And then he comes, he takes photos, and then it takes years before the power is restored. So Elvis, I'm going to call on you. Just introduce yourself. You walked in when we were screening. What are the issues and concerns that you're seeing, or solutions, or just remarks on what a Mitumba energy scenario might look like for Kenya and the role of parliamentarians?
Well, thank you, Percy. My name is Elvis Wambura. I work with the Kenya Young Parliamentarians. As you said, just walked in when the video was playing, so I didn't really get the details of what it entailed, but I think I'll share two cents about the discussion that is ongoing. And I would agree with my brother, first of all, on the occasion of politicians always wanting to take credit. But again, also mention that I think it's a perception that we as the public have always placed on them, because for a long time now, the public has failed to understand the roles of our members of parliament and even members of county assemblies, which are three as per the constitution: oversight, representation, and legislation. But that one is not visible. When no matter how good you are at legislation, no matter what good things you do in parliament, the public will not rate you as being active and championing their cause unless they see you at the ground level doing something. And that's why I think our politicians have always tried to carry credit where they can, because that is what the public relates with. But if we get to a point where the public understands the roles of the members of parliament, the roles of the members of county assemblies, then our members of parliament and our politicians will not have no business coming down to the grassroots to show that they are doing something. So I think they have their own faults, but again, as a public, we have our own faults because of the kind of expectations that we have on these politicians. Secondly, on this conversation of clean energy, I know this is a conversation that the government always has spoken about and have come out clear about what they want to do around it. But as you know very well, according to reports by the International Energy Agency, 2023, a very recent one, shows that Kenya is 75% connected to electricity. That means only about 25% of our population is not connected to electricity. And I was, again, our senior here has spoken about the issue about priorities on areas that we can use clean and renewable energy, like the Western region, the Northern region. When you find that the government also still insists on providing electrical energy where we can use renewable energy, it's also another paradox that needs to be broken, because as a country, we have enough or sufficient supply of, for example, solar energy that can power a lot of our consumption in terms of energy requirements as a country. And therefore, that is an avenue that the government should explore. We have a lot of untapped renewable energy potential, as well as energy efficiency mechanisms that we can tap into. And those are two main areas that maybe our government, and this one I speak as also a Kenyan, areas that we see that there is potential. They're investing in renewable energy. We do not have sufficient infrastructure as a country for renewable energy. And that's why you see, even in at the rural areas, most of the time when you look at the people who are now providing the solar energy, they are private entities and not the national government. And that should be a question, because if private institutions can go into the deepest of our grassroots, rural areas, and supply energy in terms of the solar energy and other forms of energy, then there's a lot of potential in that area. And most people, when you go to the rural areas, are now using that and paying, even if it's as little coins every day, to make sure that they continue being powered. So infrastructure is one area that the government should really invest in, so that we reduce the dependency on fossil fuels. I think that is a point. And of course, the second one, which I also think about, is efficiency. How are we spending the energy that we have? When you look at reports, about 43% of our energy is lost annually. And this is a biggest contributor to the demand that as a country we always fail to meet. So it's also an avenue where maybe policymakers, which is Parliament and the executive, can look into how we are using the energy that we already have, the efficiency of it, because with every kilowatt of energy that is saved, then we will also ensure that we reduce the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere by about 0.86 pounds. So efficiency is also something that needs to be looked at, and this must be looked at wholesomely by both the executive arm of government and the legislature. And this now connects to the nexus of climate change, which is also part of the conversation that is ongoing here. So let me stop there for now, and then maybe we'll continue the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And very good. And my lip is itching. Way, hey. But before my lip, you'll come in. Elvis said something critical. You know, we're always talking about government is not doing this. Do we understand the role of government? And then I'm just going to give you 1 minute, because we need to film the next one.
I will not even take 1 minute. Just to add on, I got provoked by his idea. I just want to add on. I don't know if it's good habit or bad habit. I need to stop it. So, as he said, the solar. We have the biggest solar in East Africa, in Garissa. And I'm very sure I can guess that 25% people who are not connected to electricity, they are from Garissa or Northeastern. So the solar is there. It is the largest in East and Central Africa, I think, in Garissa County, Northeastern. But you know, the efficiency, as he said, I don't think if it is working as per expectation, but it is there, you know, in terms of physicalities. Yes, that's what I want to say. There's, you know, you can have it, but the efficiency of use and maybe how it's helping. You know, in Wajir, currently, you know, even in the radio stations and we work on, they get to a scale we are on off air. We are not doing coverage on that county because there's no electricity. And you know, you have the largest solar in East Africa, in Garissa Wajir. So why, you know, if you are not connected to that, even the nearest house in that solar maybe can be using firewood up to now. So
True.
the efficiency.
Yeah, efficiency, but I think it's also affordability. And those are some of the concerns that we really need to bring out. You find in areas where we have this big energy projects, which are supposed to be powering us and getting us to power our development, but also to have access to electricity, you find that the communities that live around these big projects are actually not connected to that electricity, so they're not benefiting from it. So that's an issue that we put down, and I think it's worth having a separate conversation about. But at this moment, I want to close the Mitumba conversations and invite Iman for the screening of the market scenario.
Thank you for that, Pasi. And just the last statement that you made about the community that has these huge projects in its backyard does not have electricity or basic access to energy. I don't know if any of you know, but Samuel has a paper on that exact topic about how the Olkaria dams, the community that lives in that exact area, not only were they evacuated, not only were they losing their ancestral land, they did not even gain energy at the end of the day. So I think I would invite all of you to gain access to that document to further your knowledge on this. So with that, I think we're ready to screen the next video. Are we good to go? Perfect. Okay. Please pay attention because, again, I'm going to cold call people. I'm going to ask you to speak even if your hand is not up because I need to hear your voice. Enjoy.
Things were looking up. Not only had I just received my master's in journalism, one of the region's best brains had chosen to mentor me. I was ready for the good things in life. At work, I eventually got posted to the environment desk. As I traveled, I began to notice that the weather pattern was changing. Too hot and dry, or too rainy and flooded. But my monthly highlight was the meetings with the professor who was mentoring me. Prof, as I would call him, would buy lunch and I would bring my articles. Then we'd analyze what was happening in the region. His sharp mind turned me into a believer in markets, in their efficiency, their dynamism, and their ability to transform societies. Prof and I were to write a book in 2050. It was supposed to be the story of how Eastern Africa became the economic powerhouse of the continent. But the story didn't turn out exactly the way we thought it would. Even as I worked on environmental stories, energy remained the biggest buzz, with new technologies, new ideas, new money, and its stories came at us with every extreme weather event or episode of volatile energy prices. I loved discussing these stories at our monthly lunches. Prof was deeply invested in finding coherent energy plans, but our leaders didn't seem interested in creating any policies. That disinterest proved disastrous with the 2025 financial crash. The rich nations were the first to go down, but we were all living on borrowed money. We looked to our leaders for guidance, but most quietly served their terms, or simply resigned and dodged accountability. My stories about the environment were increasingly dominated by climate change, as it became a frightening reality everywhere. That forced people to give the Paris Climate Agreement stronger legal force and accelerated a shift to low-carbon energy systems. Exceptional turmoil brought more security forces into our region, which destabilized global oil prices, speeding up the shift to electric vehicles in the rich world. It was an exciting time to be a journalist, but a scary time to be a citizen of this region. We were just waiting, wondering, drifting. Before the crash, prospectors had been looking in Africa for minerals needed by clean energy technologies. They had quietly staked their claims, but now the invasions began. The first invasion was the clean energy and natural gas companies, ready to exploit their mineral rights or find new ones. You see, huge loans initially taken by our governments to fund fossil projects that are now obsolete had to be paid up. The easiest way out was for our governments to accept huge payouts offered by rich nations. But there was a catch to their offer. The rich nations in return took our minerals and rare earth metals for their own renewable technology investments. Well, it seemed like mere barter exchange, but on face value, we were the biggest losers. The second invasion was agricultural lands. Prof and I considered land a commodity like everything else. If the foreigners will pay for it, let them do so, or so we thought. I wrote the stories of tycoons and corporations paying our governments large sums to develop fertile land in remote areas of our countries. But sooner or later, our farmers were forced to sell out or move, unable to compete with these commercial farms. The third invasion was companies exploiting the new carbon markets. Creative local investors in Eastern Africa had found new ways to use a global carbon market to reward our people who restored degraded lands or protected healthy habitats. Eventually, our local companies were taken over by the international traders. The results? Financial profits went to foreigners who focused on the climate emergency and dismissed local needs and cultural traditions. I saw my people lose control of their forests and land. The fourth invasion was exporting electrical power. Our development plans called for more manufacturing, but there was little industry in the region. As a result, the large-scale power projects in hydro, gas, solar and wind, built in the 2020s, were now producing more electricity than Eastern Africans could consume or afford. But there is a ready market for clean power in North Africa and Europe. The power companies of our region connected their excess power to the European grid using ultra-high voltage lines provided by China. As our power went north, everyone on the deal earned valuable clean energy credits that could be sold for profit or used to meet the Paris Agreement's targets. Prof was delighted to see the EAPP back in business. But it wasn't due to any great regional corporation. Instead, this was market-driven by companies in Europe and North Africa buying Eastern Africa's power. So much electricity left the region that local people were still unable to have the light and power they needed. Only major African businesses and wealthy households could afford it. Local people objected, but government leaders just saw good deals, new incomes, reduced deficits, and a more comfortable life for themselves. Any downside was just the price of development. Time and circumstance were not sympathetic to oil and coal, and by 2040, both had faded from our energy systems. Many of the big oil projects I wrote about in such excitement in those early days never took off or were half built and then abandoned. Now it was time to face the long-term consequences of the 4 invasions of minerals, agricultural land, carbon markets, and power exports. The evolution of Eastern Africa's energy system moved in 2 very different directions. In one, there was a large-scale clean energy revolution, a world of global business serviced by a low-carbon economy and energy system, efficiently meeting the needs of those ready to accept and pay for what it delivers. It was Prof's dream come true. The other system is a mishmash of whatever works. The poorest can no longer afford any of it. Many of these people have been pushed out of their land in rural areas and even in cities. Slums are strung with dangerous and illegal electric wires. The working poor cope with cheap solutions, solar and wind installations that rarely work long enough to pay off the debts used to buy them. They rely on charitable efforts to give them more efficient wood stoves or create methane gas from urban sewage and toilets. They rarely succeed. For the middle class, there are multiple renewable energies on offer, including a few local technologies that show promise. Most renewables are small-scale and off-grid, rarely integrated with each other. Some work well, others are cheap second-hand technologies from other continents. The weak ones rarely last. Frankly, we're nothing but a dumping site for obsolete and shoddy goods, from cars to solar panels. Good business for the middlemen, but not for buyers. The global energy transition to a low-carbon world is thriving in 2050. But here in our region, the transition is not working for most people. All these changes and invasions have created a queer patchwork across the land. I have pictures of the ugly scars of mining operations, areas barren of indigenous plants, birds, and animals. We are biologically impoverished, with a wealth of Eastern African life reduced to an ancient, magical mythology. I have pictures showing vast grey areas where shanties spill out of the old city centres, next to wealthier neighbourhoods boasting a rich garden green canopy. And I have contrasting pictures of rural areas with tidy crops parcelled out in neat lines. The rivers here are often a bright sterile green of fertilized algae, which sucks out the oxygen fish need. All these busy enterprises have private security firms keeping order and reducing theft. They say it's necessary to keep our own people safe. So who counts as our own people? My last discussions with Prof kept asking this question. We'd joked that all our fellow Africans who run these businesses are like the old colonial tribal chieftains. They control the land and decide who gets which benefits. They've signed the international agreements that handed our region over to outsiders, even though our ancestors taught us to liberate ourselves and control our own destiny. As for workers and professionals, we learned to be docile and had seen enough violence not to want any more. Many of us want to leave, but where can we go? Who will take us in? So that's the book. Our world is enjoying this fragile new world order, this development. Me, I find it hard to celebrate what I now see.
Can we get the lights on? Okay, just listen to the sound of my voice. So this is, okay, that is very bright. Amazing. Okay, so I'm glad we go with this last because in my opinion, it's the most complex story we have. I'll just do a quick debrief in case you got lost within the plot. This is a story about a surface level utopia. From the top, it looks like everything is perfect. Kenya transitioned to zero carbon, renewable energy powered system. Everything at the surface is amazing and it looks good. Then you take a peek closer under the surface. You realize Kenyans don't own the land where these huge renewable energy projects are being set up. They don't own the minerals that are being used to create the lithium batteries and the iron ore batteries that are being used to store the renewable energy. They don't even own the electricity because it's being imported by one party to another party, and they're splitting the benefits among themselves. What is Kenya left with? Barren land, stolen land, leaders who are benefiting only themselves, while the community has no jobs, no power, no land, no minerals. So I want you to think closely about this. We call for clean energy transition. We call for push from fossil fuel to renewable energy. But are we looking at the intricacies of this transition? Who owns these systems? And the issue of ownership was brought up a lot. And I think now with this, I'll invite Samuel to talk about this because, like I mentioned, he's penned a paper, and this paper is within the Energy for Whom, Pasi? Energy for What, apologies, within the Energy for What report. And if you want to have a closer look, we have some copies for you to pick one. And within that article, it talks about that exact issue. If you own the land, this is community land, it has been ancestral land. But now, huge energy projects are being set up. That energy is being exported somewhere else. What is the community left with, and who is to protect them? Go ahead, Samuel.
Thank you very much. Now, there's nothing as challenging as development. Because if we don't manage development, it will be another avenue of, it would invite a lot of challenges. Number one, you see, for those of you who've seen the Sustainable Development Goals, it has 5 pillars. It speaks about the planet, people, what else? It has some 5 P's something, but people is one of them. Now, as we try and embrace development, there's how we are sold into this development issue without rethinking again. And I think this narrative is what is affecting us. If you watch our politicians or leaders of business or the corporates, anyone who wants to bring an idea to our country, especially on energy, they always say we don't have enough energy to spur growth. And that is why we need coal, for example. We need a lot of energy and everything. One of the examples they always give is the Asian tigers. They always tell us we need to go the way of the Asian tigers. We were in the same level with South Korea. We were in the same level long time ago with Malaysia, Singapore. And they always make it one of the best narratives. We must make Kenya look like Singapore. But then the question comes, when we bring this development, is it people-centered? Is it people-conscious? Is it going to, respect the dignity of humanity? So one, it is not actually just happening in Kenya. It is happening all the way up to Norway. It's happening all the way up to Netherlands. Right now, there is a scandal in Netherlands of the carbon credits. They came, got the communities together and then ran away with the money. Now, in Kenya, a lot of investment is happening on energy. We have a lot of potential for clean energy. But at what cost of humanity? If you go to Olkaria today, the community that was displaced, they did not look at the alternatives of them having a sustainable livelihood. They were just told, gathered together and told, now you have to change your lifestyle. The way you are living your lifestyle of having a lot of cattle, you've got to move. Now, the question always comes in, have you considered how those people have been living? The economic viability of how you're moving them. And as we were in one of the recent fieldworks, one of the questions I asked and I kept asking these people is, how are your supply chains that sustain your economic activities? If you have cattle, this is how you sell them. If we are going to do a project here, it means we should not, dismantle or destroy the way you've been having your economic viability. So resource exploitation should not be exploitation of the livelihoods of communities. But what I can tell you, I think for those of you who are, information conscious, you saw in the newspapers, it was, splash on the cover of the, I think, Business Daily or something. Kenya auctions millions of acres for carbon credits. There is a lot of potential for geothermal, but communities are being pushed out. There is the elephant in the room now. PPP, public-private partnerships. The government is just cheering on as the private entities come in and manipulate. And in the case of Olkaria, for example, European Investment Bank was the key financier. But it took long for them to know communities were being manipulated.
So as we have all these discussions, let us be careful. There is a cost to development, and that cost should not be human dignity. You know, because if I lose my land today, how I have been earning a living is disrupted, and I have not given an alternative that would improve my life, then that is where unjust transitions come in. They always sell, we are selling clean energy. But even scholars are saying sustainable or clean energy should not be only sustainable and clean to the environment. It should also be sustainable on the livelihoods of people. So a lot of communities are going to be, displaced. It is taking a lot, it's taking a toll on the livelihoods of communities. So we should be conscious because as I finish up, the entry point these people know is if you communicate with civil society who have been agitating for clean energy and abandoning fossil fuels, they will easily forget that the livelihoods of communities are going to be destroyed. So let us have a holistic way of understanding because communities will suffer. So let me put it at that because it would take a lot of discussions and I'm into other researches on the same on unjust transitions, but that is happening literally.
Thank you so much for opening the floor for us. And please track down those papers and read them, and you will learn so much from the first-hand accounts from these communities. And a queue is forming, and I suspect that is because the story is from a journalist perspective, and the room has a large number of journalists. So the queue will begin with Malim, then Ernest, then Abby. Malim, you come from the Northeastern region.
Yes.
You're a journalist.
Yes.
You've seen these huge renewable energy projects being set up at the cost of the community. And I'm sure you have a perspective to give. What role do you as a journalist who represents the communities that are being affected, who are going through what Samuel called an unjust transition system? What role does the media play, first of all? Second of all, how, like you saw the main protagonist of the story was being affected by reporting story after story after story of the community being left behind while people are benefiting, their resources are going. A recolonization is what he called it. So please give us your perspective as a journalist from this community who has seen firsthand and reported on these issues. Go ahead, Malim.
Thank you, Iman. First, I think you said this was the most complicated. I think this was the most easy for us as a journalist because it was flowing. We were following the story. I think this is what we do in a day-to-day activity of ours. This is our source of income. This is where we earn our coins. So we are very familiar with the story. This is what we do. We are journalists, environment journalists, because I'm a member of KENSIJA. So first, I see just to outside the question, to turn off the mic when we are not using. I think the guys are struggling to change battery frequently. Maybe it will help if we turn off the mics when we are not using.
It's okay, we have several. Go ahead, Don't be bothered by that.
So for energy, to reserve the energy, not just the economic. So the other thing is as a journalist, we see this day to day, as you have said, from where I come from. The problem with journalists with this coverage is ours is to report with the 4 W's and the 1 H. So yours is to tell the story. But still, if you go to the villages frequently, it floods, you are there with your mic, you're asking questions. There's a drought, you are there with your mic. So they ask you have been doing coverage for the last 3 years and we don't see any changes. So at that time they even got, they don't they give up. Like there's no need of, asking, and our images and our voices are outside there and there's nothing changed. Sometimes you may end up, even missing someone to interview because there's no the repercussion, there's no outcome of the interview. So we feel as a citizen and as a journalist, we have the duty to report. But as a citizen of also the people where we came from, to see them suffer and go through all those problems, I think sometimes we are even confused. Because I even did the carbon story. I did the coverage of carbon. Today I'm told the carbon is not good. Yesterday I was telling the carbon is the way to go. So sometimes we are confused. I did the story by so many hours, a good coverage of the carbon. because we were invited that to a training like this. We were told carbon is the best way, is the challenge to solve climate change. Today now, then carbon is not good. So I have to go back again, tell them that what I said yesterday, I'm very sorry, but you know, there's this other side of the coin. Yesterday I was reporting on this side. Now I have seen the other side of the story. So when also we are invited when there is a launch of a big company, we do the coverage. You know, you are getting employment. This is a big company. This italeta faida mingi nini. For the people will celebrate. We did the coverage. Then today I'm told those companies, they have the negative aspect of it. They are coming with the negativity. Then I have to go and tell them this big company we were celebrating yesterday, they are not good as we thought. So there's always that, you know, challenge of a media and these all balancing things. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Malim. You've not only brought the personal conundrum of, you know, reporting story after story and having to balance whether you need employment or whether this is a company you should associate with. And you've also brought the larger issue of information and disinformation. And after Ernest speaks on behalf of media, I'll invite some of the institutions here that generate knowledge bases to talk about that, the lack of data, lack of information. There being a lot of disinformation in the space that confuses journalists who end up, you know, reporting some things that may not be accurate. So Ernest, please represent the media before we go to academia and the international space with Clive and Abby.
Thank you. I would like to talk on, I think they normally call the fourth estates of the media. And I feel like as the media here, we sometimes do fail to push our role. Probably it could be because of underfunding or being driven by other gains that we want to achieve. We forget the story and we push an agenda. That's why there's that misinformation and disinformation that we get to not to understand. I feel Kenya is more on, when I watch the market scenario now as a viewer, I feel like Kenya is more aligned on the market side, even though we don't feel it, but it's something that is coming up. And it's important for us as the media to just, you know, understand what is happening and be there to show people, not to report, but actually tell them what is going to happen, rather than when we find out it's too late. Like I felt very bad the other day, just learning that the holiday that you were given is because of carbon credits. It was not because we want a balanced, I don't know, that's what I read somewhere. Maybe the media misled me, but that's the thing. But we like experts. You see the way we normally have elections, and then there are these experts in the room, they tell us everything, or our heads of state has passed away, and then they tell us how things go. They explain with us that I feel like the media needs to really be vocal in terms of things environment. They needs to be empowered a lot so that they discuss and talk about these things so that people don't have that confusion as we've had on that particular front. That was my thoughts on the media, empowerment to the media, and ensuring actually they're sufficient with enough information. It's not a second guessing, and they're empowered in a way that they are not corruptible to pass a wrong information. Yeah, thank you.
Empowerment and resourcing, because again, if you have enough resources and you're not desperate for, you know, the next paycheck, then you can make a better choice, and that leads back to the conversation around choice. Perfect segue. Abby, take it away.
I think I'll just build up on what like the media people have said. For like the reporting, I could say like the most cases we've heard about from the academia side is the climate information is the terminologies are heavy. So even they feel like mostly them, they're just reporting what they've had. So you're not, you haven't taken time to understand what you're reporting on. Like, for example, now after the Africa Climate Summit, the president was talking about how it's actually a chance for Africa now to make the shift even economically to steer the world into renewable energy. So, but now even the it's now a challenge, because now as academia, we know what they're doing, but at the forefront, at the media, on the TV, you'll just be seeing
450 million in carbon markets from UAE, but you don't know the underlying issues now that leads to COP28. Like most of the announcements you've seen this month about the investments, they'll be leading on to the negotiations, where now they'll be saying the African countries have allowed us to continue the emissions with the investments in place. But now when it's in the media, it's a different story. They just see job creation, money is coming into the country. So that's a challenge. And academia, I can say also it's our challenge. Maybe it will be, we're not able to give out information in such a way that it's consumable to the everyday person. So for example, you'll find a report, it just has heavy words, a lot of calculations and stuff. So people are like, they're super bored. They're like, now what are we reading here? I can't understand anything. So what's climate change? All those terminologies. Then you find for like negotiations, there's a whole different language when you're negotiating as a country for like amendments in the Paris agreements and stuff. So I think maybe we just sit together, but I think we should start with capacity building. And this is for all professions, because now climate change affects everyone. So you need to know like even a little bit and have like credible sources you can go to, because we have credible information centers, like the most recent, the way they were talking about carbon markets, because this Annex 2 countries and Annex 1 countries for negotiations, they were saying that they'll use the carbon markets to counter the effects of to reduce the temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So with that, when you go to us local people, we are not understanding how we're going to eat. So I think we really need to be able to disseminate the information for everyone, that it's able to be consumed, and they know how, like a big decision being made, how it affects the small Mwananchi. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think that connects the two points that were brought out by the media team in the room today, and you brought in the role of academia in making sure that the information they're relying on is correct, is adequate, is accessible. And I think that also brings in what Dofan said earlier about how sometimes those documents and sometimes that knowledge base may be so complex that the common Mwananchi cannot interact with it. And that's also the role of, a lot of young people, a lot of youth groups, a lot of artists and creatives to break down that information in a way that is easily accessible and digestible by the common person who doesn't need, a bachelor's in environmental science to interact with the document. Thank you, Abby. And I think Clive had something today to say about the role of, the international space and the donor community when it comes to the markets scenario that we have just watched. Go ahead, Clive.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would want to reiterate the cross-cutting questions on carbon markets. Yeah, I believe that the carbon markets still, they remain volatile for Africa. And I think it is not our critical African position. We do not really need it, though I recognize its important role within the Paris Agreement. The stark reality is that our emissions as Africans, we have like 4% emissions. And so when we say that we want carbon markets and countries are hugely advocating for it, it is basically diverting the Africa's attention to cut the emissions, because our emissions are barely negligible, and therefore carbon markets, they are just a distraction that tends to take a different perspective, giving more polluter paying polluter permits. It's like giving them permits to continue emitting. I believe that what we really need is to cut emissions at the source. The historic polluters must begin paying the climate reparations, not diverting the conversation into carbon markets and all those permits that come along with it. Secondly, I believe most of these companies, the multinationals that are in Africa, most of them are based on the capitalistic systems, and they have the negative ramifications to the vulnerable communities who experience the detrimental impacts of climate change. And also we are sacrificing nature in the name of development and civilization. Like right now, when we check the African ecosystems, our population is growing and more people are, going into the forest for real estates and all of that comes with it. But we barely understand, or maybe there is no that clear information on how we can navigate our collective agenda within the African position. Another thing, going back to the carbon markets for communities, like recently we're seeing the Ogiek community, which is an indigenous community being evacuated from the forest, and that is their ancestral land. They've been living there. The government is evicting them from their ancestral land in the name of carbon credits, since the UAE has channeled a lot of resources in terms of monetary value so that they can continue emitting while the communities within the African communities are being chased away from their localities. So just to wind up, I believe that we need to continue cutting emissions from the emissions need to be cut from the polluters, the big polluters, and our African position should not really be diverted in the name of carbon markets and all that comes with it, because it is also critical for we in our African position to adopt policies that can enhance collective progress within the circular economy. And therefore, this information needs to reach out to the grassroots, because when you go to the grassroots telling them about carbon markets, they do not even understand it. And even the rules governing the carbon markets, they do not allow the developing countries to trade competitively. The markets only favors the West. And so African countries, we need to have a stronger position, act in unity. And also the media must also continue to play its critical role, in airing the stories and also gaining more insight on how Africa can be resilient without many distractions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clive. And I know there's a lot of voices still in the room who want to contribute, like Duncan. But before we do that, I want to hear from the online group. I know we have Halima and Belkisa online who want to speak. So if I can ask you to speak in that order. Are you guys there? Okay, I see Belkisa's hand is up and Halima's hand is up. Halima, you can go first, and then Belkisa. Go ahead. Okay, I can see you unmuted, but we can't seem to hear her. If you can just type in the chat if you're speaking, Halima, to say yes or no. Okay, Halima is speaking, but we can't hear. So is it a problem on our end, or is it a problem on her end? On her end? Okay. Halima, just if you can try some things on your end to try and adjust to the mic while we ask Belkisa to contribute. Belkisa, if you can unmute and say something. You're still muted if you're speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Belkisa Bashir. Thank you so much for letting me in for this discussion. It's really very crucial and very important. Actually, I work an organization called Barwaka Youth Organization, which works with indigenous and also the vulnerable communities and the pastoralism, so-called. Really, I'm very amazed. I'm very amazed and very astonished to hear about the energy and those kind of development that we're talking about. Simply because the reason why I'm saying that is because, as you know, the system, until we change the system, nothing happened. There was a lot of development before energy. Every time there is something that is diverting us from one corner to the other corner, while people are suffering, while people are becoming more poorer and the rich are becoming more richer. So for me to hear about development, we need to fix the system and reverse the system in the first place. And secondly, with the system, we have a corruption in between. And those corruptions, you see, anything that is the enemy of development is a corruption. So it is the cancer for African countries, especially. For me, talking about any development, I refer myself to the system because I've been working the grassroots for more than 15 years. And you see, when you see that within a citizen, when a person cannot get a documentation, when a person cannot be part of the citizenship, when a person declined from their right basic necessity, which is water, food, and whatever, whatnot, you kind of like thinking, oh, where am I? Where are we? Is this really part of our country, or are we just part of another country? So I hear about the media. Media is playing a great role in this society because media will not be allowed to come and document those places. So we are talking about energy. Energy will come when we fix the system, when these people are being given their right to live just like any other normal people. And I'm talking about Kenyans wherever they are, because my organization works from different corners. I've been to Bomet, I've been to what do we call Kajiado County, I've been to Garissa, I've been to Northeastern, Tana River, all those kind of areas, because we have no boundaries. For us, we are humanitarians and we want to see people, you see, to make sure that they are okay. So what we were supposed to be discussing, to be honest with you, my people there, is that how are we going to fix this system that divides and discriminates the society? Until we fix our house properly, then how can we fix others? Because that's why you see this disagreement between us. Always we blame others. So how are we going to fix our own house? That's my question. Thank you so much. Be blessed.
Thank you so much, Belkisa, for bringing in the voice of the parts of the communities that are marginalized, that are fringe, that are on the outskirts, and are not, as hard as some of the more vocal parts of the community and communities as well. So Halima, you want to try one more time before we just read out your comment from the chat? I would like to hear your voice if that's possible.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I think we can hear you. Go ahead. Amazing.
Can you hear me now? No?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
I sent my comment. Thank you so much. I really, yes.
Oh no, we're losing you, Halima. You're going in and out. I don't know if it's the internet connection or the audio. Can you try one more time? Try internet. That's unfortunate. Okay, I think I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. So my name is Halima Hussein. I'm a partner at Hawa and Hussein Advocates, a Nairobi-based law firm, a private practitioner. I'm also a PhD researcher at the University of Pau in France. I'm working with the Energy Justice and Social Contract Chair in the university. I've really enjoyed the interventions from the floor, and I just wanted to reiterate what Abby and Oltetia had said regarding the need for social license to operate. The reason why we have so much climate antipathy is because people don't think we speak their language. If you need to speak Kiborana, if you need to speak Turkana, if you need to speak Somali, you need to speak the language that people speak, that communities speak. If you have the community behind you, no project will proceed, will go on. And just to give you examples, someone had mentioned Lamu Coal and Turkana Oil. Recently, just this year, 2 strategic investors from the Turkana oil project, I believe it was Africa Oil, as well as Total Energies, both pulled out. And one of the reasons they pulled out was because there's so much community agitation against the project. That was the same reason the Lamu coal project failed. The community did not feel they were adequately involved and participated in the environmental impact assessment process, and the project failed in court. So bringing in communities means you have the right stakeholders to either support or go against a project in support of course, the climate climate pathways and the climate goals of a particular area, country, region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Halima, and I'm glad we got to hear your voice and your perspective. Thank you for your contributions, both Balkisa and Halima, and I hope the online audience feels engaged. And if you have something to say, just type in the chat and we'll make sure you get a chance to speak. With that, I want to thank all of you again for being so engaged, for being so positive and open to have these conversations. I think I'll now hand back to, perfect, amazing. I'll hand back now to Pasi to walk us through the final scenario, which is a struggle scenario. Pasi?
So we'll just see the screening of that. Lights, camera, action. So as the screening is coming up and we're dimming the lights, this struggle story is the last and final story or scenario that we're going to be highlighting. And it's really a story about an ordinary Kenyans who decide to find energy solutions for their rural communities for themselves. So pay another attention and we'll have a conversation after both episodes. Thanks. It's called Struggles.
So, where do I start? Well, I remember when my wife would want to leave the city while I want to stay. Then it switched. But eventually we agreed and left. The marvels of the city had worn thin with overcrowding and pollution. So we moved to a smaller town where life was easier, cheaper, and we could make a bigger impact and do something that matters. We quickly found out how different life was. There were barely any services, such as water, electricity, or security. But there was a robust community. Despite the connections not being very legal, everyone here worked with their neighbors and formed networks to meet their needs. Sometimes those connections weren't exactly legal, but we had no option. Eventually, we adjusted. My wife, who used to work at the Ministry of Health, found her place first, working at the local clinic as a volunteer, then with the local council, helping translate national policies into workable solutions on the ground. Since I used to work at the Ministry of Energy, I began a small solar business. This was inspired by my children who needed dependable power to access the internet. Then, success. We brought electricity to our children's school, and the school sponsor fully bought in and set up an energy fund. It proved that renewable energy could challenge the bigger pay-as-you-go companies, which weren't as affordable as they seemed. While not everyone was supportive, I didn't expect a big fight from the central government, who accused me of undermining the energy providers to our region. One day, the central government cut off a neighborhood I had wired up with renewable electricity. The local people, both young and old, protested in such numbers that it made the national news. Progress was hard, but worth it. With time, we realized that nothing was off the table, especially when the government was not able to help us. The unreliable weather meant we had to find new crops and grow different types of food. In my renewables business, we were now selling energy to local computer servers as well as households. Energy storage had improved a lot, but a mix of technologies was still more reliable. Solar, wind, biogas, with some backup fossil fuels. Despite the hard times, young people were thriving as masters of the digital world, using it to provide the social glue, circulate information, and help with payment systems. Raw determination and rapid learning was the rule, supported by laughter in the face of frequent and frightening hazards. These shocks affected everyone, making the role of the national government clear, including cooperation and policies in the region and the world. But when times were getting harder and we needed the government's help, it was hard to find. My wife passed away. Our last born also fell very ill. A new epidemic was killing us by the thousands. I wanted to believe that better times lay ahead, but I had no idea what better meant anymore. The epidemic eventually subsided. Our last born got better, but the blow of losing my wife was really hard to get over. It was difficult to adjust to this new normal. I began to think a lot more about the legacy I wanted to leave and decided to hand over my energy business to my children. It was an interesting time because many of the bigger energy projects were declining, opening up the space for smaller energy systems.
Don't worry, we'll start it again. We're having trouble with episode 2.
Our last born got better, but the blow of losing my wife was really hard to get over. The epidemic eventually subsided. Our last born got better, but the blow of losing my wife was really hard to get over. It was difficult to adjust to this new normal. I began to think a lot more about the legacy I wanted to leave and decided to hand over my energy business to my children. It was an interesting time because many of the bigger energy projects were declining, opening up the space for smaller energy systems like ours. Low demand and production glut for oil drove down its price. Coal-fired power plants were killed off by enforcement of carbon prices. Also, many of the big dams were struggling. Building the Eastern Africa power pool proved difficult. As most of the old power projects became white elephants, gas and geothermal became the most reliable of the remnants of the central grid. The situation reminded me of a hyrax. It looks like a large rodent, but its closest relative is the elephant. In the energy world, the white elephants were slowly shuffling off the scene, while the small, nimble hyrax were increasing in number like the many small-scale technologies that run the microgrids and district energy systems of the region. That was the inspiration behind our business name, Hyrax Energy Solutions. We were growing because we were more technologically suited to the dispersed populations of our time. My youngest daughter, the one who barely survived the epidemic that took her mother, has now decided to run for office. She wants to make central government effective again. This new generation amazes me. As children of hard times, they used their education and pragmatism to find opportunities in this unpredictable world. They understood that clean air, not energy, is the scarce resource of our times. We are still battered by weather and unusual diseases. But have things improved? I think so. We have more control over our own affairs. Scientists say that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is no longer increasing, but others fear climatic change cannot be stopped because we began too late. Around our town, firewood and charcoal use has reduced, with many households resorting to electricity and biogas stoves. The big energy projects still function, but much of their power goes into transport where it's harder to replace oil. I still miss my wife. We fled to this town so many years ago. Now I cannot remember what our life was like before. It became home in every sense. I'm proud of our small contribution towards a hybrid economy and mixed energy systems. We had no plan. We just started with what was there and what was needed. Now see how far we've come, eh?
Great. So that's the final scenario, future scenario for the day. And as the lights are coming on, just a brief recap. So this is really a story of hard times, big changes in small places. So for those of you who have ushagos away from Kisumu or Nairobi, this is really a story about how to transform the rural areas and the challenges that are there. It's also a story about how people learn to change what they can and adopt to what they cannot change. So I think you probably saw a lot of that in how the story was being told. In this story, we've also seen about elements of people using their talent, using their knowledge, their skills, but not using it in the cities, but taking it out in the rural areas. We've seen the story was narrated by a retired technocrat and his wife, both who worked for government in different ministries, so Ministry of Health and Ministry of Energy. So you've had the story, so I won't recap it. I'll just highlight some of the issues. People are searching for work. They were searching for purpose. They were looking to migrate from the urban to the rural area. There are issues of trust. There are issues of where is it safe for us to relocate and stay and build our home and build our family. We saw in the story the need for food, water, fuel, and obviously silent internal secession. So we see people moving. There's this migration of people and a search for new life. So with that recap, because you know the story, I want to get reactions first. Reactions, because this is our last story, and I think everybody should have something to say, even though it was a story that captures the actors who are private sector or small businesses, retired people, where do they go? So the youth was mentioned. We see a very positive image of a reformed central government with a youth vying for position. If I don't see any volunteers, I like calling people. Duncan, and then we'll come to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, before I comment on this, let me also commend the lady on the other end and this gentleman for being very honest about journalists and our performance. Yeah, we perform dismally sometimes, like the African Climate Summit, we did so poorly because we did so many stories were churned out, but they were totally misleading. Because most of them were done by political reporters who were just loss and damage, adaptation, mitigation, just confusing the masses. So this really took place. And now looking at that, the issue of capacity building comes back in my mind. And also collaboration. We know there are so many people doing something out of Nairobi, like the gentleman who lost his wife, but we don't know. So organization like SEED, if you know, why don't you alert us so that we can see how to bring these ones out? We have our weaknesses that we know, yes, but with such connections, a lot can be done so that we bring out these issues. And then through capacity building, like I like the gentleman from Agnes, the climate change guy, his explanation. I like what you're doing. Most scientists we talk to don't have time for us. And I think any journalist here will have to take your contact. The way you put it, I really admire that. Yeah, because the curriculum, I'll blame the academia who are here. Our curriculum on science journalism is nil. We don't have one. We are trained as journalists. The few you see here are here because they just converted themselves, like Saul became Paul. And we want to inform the public. So we are learning the hard way. Okay? And this is why capacity building comes much in our sector as well. Yeah. And the academia, we need a curriculum on science journalism, environment journalism. Specialization that is which is mentioned in the journalism schools is more of sports writing, business writing, and political writing. Exactly. And then most journalists tend to go there. because the newsrooms also have that thinking that politics sell, but environment sells more than politics.
Great.
So something need to be done here in between. So capacity building, collaboration will manage to help our people.
Sounds good. And I like that intervention because captured the issues, but also the gaps in journalism. We have an energy reference group where we build each other's capacity. We have workshops, we share notes, we use futures and scenarios tools to learn from each other so that we can build each other's capacity. So we will be sharing a link for you to join as well. Great. Gentlemen, sorry.
Yes, Simon is my name.
Simon.
And for me, actually, I would say, what a way to end the session with that video, because it really speaks to what we as young people in the leadership space are usually advocating for. That yes, we have had all these complaints here and there, what the government is not doing, what it is doing, but the question is actually, we as a people, what are we doing with the talent and skills that we have to bring that change? And that is exactly what the person has spoken towards in that video, that in his own way, in his own small way, together with the family, they were able to convert their skills to something that was helpful to the society. And that is what we as a people now need to focus our energies towards, that with the skills that we have been able to marshal over time in this space of energy and climate action, what interventions are we providing in the community? And that is what we, as somebody who is working with the young people in the spaces of climate change and energy, we are doing. Like recently, we were able to host the Youth Climate Summit at Sarit Expo Center. And what we were able to do was to share the stories of young people who are doing amazing work in the spaces of climate action and energy in our nation. Stories that do not make mainstream media. Why? Because they are not involved in politics or do not mention somebody big in the government. Because I feel like actually that is how our stories, the stories we get on media usually are shaped towards to. If the story does not include a name of one of the big politicians, then it cannot make the news. And yet a number of young people are doing amazing work on the ground. So for me, my call to action that I have got from the video is that what can we do as a people in our small ways to effect change? Because all these big projects in the end of the day might fall, but how will we remain at the end of it all?
Brilliant.
So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Voice of the Youth, please pass the mic just behind you. You'll be next.
About like the last statement at the end of the video about working with what we have. Like I've seen a presentation where there's a professor from University of Embu. He was talking about how we can, like the way we are always pouring chang'ao when we find it Uko, Kiambu and other areas being sold. How can we now use it like to refine it and it can become a biofuel instead? Because if you burn it, it's still fuel. Or do we always need to rely on the Western world to tell us that we can use this and this, and we also have our own inventions?
Great.
So I think that could be something to consider.
I love that. So it links back to what Duncan was saying about science and journalism, but also academia taking the mantle forward for innovation from the ground and not always from the outside. I love that. Who's next, Dauphin?
I think it's rather funny sometimes when things replay, and I think because as an artist and speaking about artists, is art has a way of telling these stories way before, right? It's like the previous story, the struggles, the market story. There's a book that was published in 1939. It's called The Grapes of Wrath by an American author. It's called John Steinbeck. and they even made a film of it. And it's basically, it talks about what's happening in that market story, where, like people losing ownership of their land, and in this case now, we're not just talking about land. It's like, with the rise of civil society, or NGOs as we know them, there came another thing. And that thing was privatization of our public institutions and public services, right? And public services have been going to the dogs since, from healthcare to energy to education, all those things. And I think so in so many ways, sometimes even as civil society organizations, I think we've got to ask ourselves, like, are we actually serving the people, or are we serving someone else's agenda? Because you ask yourself, why is it that there's a civil society organization coming up almost every day, pretty much, right? And each organization claims to be, doing something to help a particular community, yet things seem to be getting worse by the day, right? So, so we have to stop and reevaluate. What are we really, like, the problem or the solution, right? And as far as the media goes, you have to ask yourself, who owns the mainstream media, right? Because the independence of the media has a lot to say with what stories make it to the news and what don't, right? So because if you, like, for example, in Kenya, we know, like, the majority of mainstream media houses are owned by politicians. So what do you expect, right? That somebody's gonna shoot themselves in the foot, and actually allow for news that go against their business interests, right? And so in that case also, as far as reporting goes, as far as journalism goes, then probably we also need to take the same model, the struggle story, where we stop giving so much relevance to mainstream media houses, right? And, like, own small, media houses that are actually telling our stories, right? Because how comes, like, the mainstream media houses that are telling stories of this, like a very small pocket of people dominate our news, when the majority of the population, that is struggling and has so many stories, those stories that never make the news, right? And yet we're the majority of people who are the consumers of those news. Because I've always asked myself, like, they call them newspapers, they call them news. Like, what's so new about the news, right? There are people who will buy a newspaper every day, religiously. How comes we never learn? If it's so new, how comes we never learn anything new from it, right? Why are we so obsessed with, the 7 o'clock news, 9 o'clock news, if it doesn't add any value to our lives, right? So if for example, what's valuable is my brother there, publishing is research. If the research is what's valuable to me, why do I need the newspaper? If that research, if it's just an article that has more value to me than right? And I think some of those questions that we have to ask ourselves, and at the same time, I think there's the illusion of development now as far as the struggle story go.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's every time I look at the city, the city for me is a symbol of what's wrong with our society, right? Because somebody's gonna tell you, like, all these skyscrapers symbolize development. For me, it's the other way around, right? Because with each skyscraper, you're looking at a building that there's probably 1,000 people that work there that cannot afford to live there, right?
Yeah.
So you tell me, because that tells you that building, probably 90% of the profits that are made from that building are going to maybe one or very few people, right? The 10% of it goes into everybody else who's working and sustaining that building and everything that happens in there. So is our idea of development really, like, genuinely aerial or lateral, Because if there was lateral development, for me, that would mean people who actually own something, right? Because anytime there's lateral development, you would say, like, that's a mansion it there. That means somebody owns that land and owns that building, right? And if they don't own it, then they're making money off. And it means more people, right? But anytime there's one building going up, that means there's very few people benefiting off that building,
Great.
And so for me, I think that's some of the things that, these stories like kind of reinforce some of the things I've always thought about or I'm still thinking about.
Great, thank you, Toph. And I really picked up, how do we tell our own stories when our stories are not really, the things that are needed to set the country's agenda or to change the mindsets? How do we tell our own stories? I really love that, and I hope the media representation in the room can work together with us to churn out those things. Before I invite the next person, Duncan, you mentioned the role of the media during the Africa Climate Summit. We really hope there is a strategy that is coming up for the media in streaming and following the stories that will be happening at COP28 and Kenya's presence there. So just to say that, Elvis, you'll go next and then we'll come to you.
Well, thank you, Percy. I think I'll just give 3 things that I've picked from the video that I just played. One, my brother has already started on it, and is the issue of sustainability within the cities, like Nairobi, for example. You see the man moving out of town to find a place that they can afford and live a better life than in the city. And therefore, it's the question about how have we structured our cities? Are they sustainable post-retirement or post-jobs that we have right now? And you find that it's not sustainable. Most people would enjoy the kind of cities that were there 30, 40 years ago. When you look at Nairobi, for example, estates like Buruburus and any other estates, you could see that lateral development that was there. But when you look at those estates right now, it's only skyscrapers. And therefore, that means there's a problem of sustainability. And therefore, we should even question the affordable housing program that now the government is doing, because what they are doing is the skyscrapers that we are still talking about. Are they sustainable for people in the long term? So those are questions that we should pick and maybe champion for. Secondly, is the struggles that the guy or the man in the video again goes through when they try to become innovative and provide alternative sources of energy. We find that again, government comes down to interfere with the alternative that he suppliers of energy, for example. Talk about KPLC, for example, has been a monopoly for the longest time. Any efforts to bring an alternative have always failed or are always dead on arrival. But when you go back and look at, for example, the shareholding of this KPLC, even if it's a government parastatals, go back and check who are the biggest shareholders, then that would answer the reason as to why any alternative will never see the light of the day. And so those are things that we should also try to see, how can people who have alternatives be motivated or incentivized to bring up the new ideas and new innovative ways of providing energy and sustainability. So that is another question. The third one, which is, of course, the young person or the young lady who ran for office. I'm not sure whether I saw whether she managed to clinch the seat or she didn't manage. I didn't see that in the video. Maybe I was asleep then. But it's a question again on what kind of choices do we make as a citizen? Because many times we may think very objectively in such forums, but I don't know what comes out when we approach the electioneering period. You'll not imagine the kind of choices even the people who think very objectively would make. When you see people running for office for different positions, and a very objective person with very good ideologies is there, and there's another one very tribal, most people will tend to move with the tribe card than the objective card. And then after the election, we will go back to complaining. So the kind of choices as citizens that we make also affect how our development, how we do our things will be. So the citizenry should be educated, the public should be awake and make sure that the choices they make, because we're always given only one chance to make a choice in 5 years. So every choice that they make matters, and therefore the citizens should always be informed about what kind of leaders that the kind of leaders that they choose at any electioneering period is the leader that they are going to stay with for 5 years. And lastly, because I know maybe I might not speak again, is just to also add on to the issue of media. In Kenya, media beyond being owned by the who and who's in this country, a lot of media personnel again have changed media into a tokenism kind of venture. I can tell you for a fact, if you went out here with a very objective story without money, the chances of your story making headlines would be very minimum. So a lot of stories that you see have actually been paid for, and not small money, a lot of money. Because you'll be told, I'm just a reporter, there's an editor, there's someone here, there's another person there, that all need to get something out of this story that we want to air. So we should try and find a way of protecting even the reporters out there, or whoever person is making a story, or go with the alternative that my brother has given. Find alternative ways of telling stories. Because these media houses, I can tell you, or the media personnel, most of them, I don't say all of them, but most of them have changed it into a tokenism venture, and most of them are making money out of creating stories out here. And that's why, if we were in this room and a politician is here, Percy, with a lot of knowledge that you have, if you go out there and there's a media personnel and a politician goes out there, they will ignore you and go to the politician, because at the end of the day, the politicians will cough out something. So that's also something, Asante San.
Thank you, Elvis. Let me just see how many more hands are in the room. And ladies, my God, you're so quiet. How many more hands to go? So great. Any other? You wanted to say something. But before you do, Dr. Mshai, I don't know if you can hear me. If you can, I'd like you to come in. You need to unmute, and then we'll check your sound real quick.
Hi, can you hear me?
Perfect, we can hear you.
Okay, so thank you. First of all, I had said I wasn't going to comment, partly because, let me self-identify, is that I'm very close to the stories because I was part of the team that wrote them. And so for me, I really wanted to just listen in and hear how the stories are translating. So first of all, let me just thank you very much for continuing this effort, initiative. And I think for me, what's really great is that these stories were written pre-COVID. It's been a while, it's been several years, and then just hearing and also witnessing what's happening makes me, again, just want to say kudos to the scientists and the policy actors who put the material together that led us to the stories. So that was one. And then also, I think it's just amazing to see them now. Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I just want to say again, kudos to the animation team. I know how hard it is to translate art from one media to the other. So my comments are going to kind of go into that. And I'm not as a criticism of the animation, just because of the form. One thing that for me, I'm really, really enjoying is listening to how the conversation builds on from one story to another. To be honest, if you ask me to pick, this is my favorite story. And I think it's my favorite story, number one, because it's nuanced in very quiet, understated ways, as opposed to the others, because I think that's where real action happens. But secondly, because I think it reads well against the other stories. So if I can just share just a couple of comments going back to what people have said. But I'm also saying that to encourage you, please read the stories in full, and then look at the material that SID also put together that supports those stories. Because I think for people who are saying, can you guys give us a training? We as journalists feel that we want information, but we don't have it. I think that booklet has got the kind of, at least a beginning of the kind of material that you're actually looking for. And that actually may become a really good basis, even if the group of journalists who are there together got themselves into a group and just studied that book and studied not so much the stories, but studied the issues. I think you've got a good basis right there. So for me, that's one takeaway that I think we can do. Just coming to this story, I just wanted to just emphasize, this is not just a story about retirees. Actually, this couple moves out when they are pretty young. Their kids are still in school. And it is a story of how by the time this man retires, we've seen him grow over 20, 30 years. So for me, the first challenge is to ask, are we reaching young professionals no matter where they live? And I think the comment somebody just asked about, are cities sustainable? And after we retire, I think the question we should ask is, are cities, especially the big cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, are they sustainable even now? Because I noticed over COVID, and that's why I emphasize that these stories were pre-COVID, a number of young professionals moved out of the city. And one of the things that I think is fueling that is that technology, and by technology, I mean IT, has made it easier for many people to, even if you've got your clients in Nairobi, I know a lot of artists, a lot of people who work digitally are now working and they're living in Nyandarua, Kilifi, Wundanyi, but they're being able to work with clients who are living in Nairobi, Mombasa, and just be able to go to the city once or twice a week. So my question is this a trend that's going to happen, that more and more young people move? And when they move, what's also the other reason that they're happening is that it's easier, you're getting good schools out of Nairobi. You're getting, people are actually saying, I can live very cheaply and do everything I want. And people are building communities. So I think that's something we need to ask ourselves, because as it says in the story, the reason that this guy goes into what he does is he gets out there, his kid's school needs IT, he provides that, and then other people come and say, can you help us with more energy solutions? And that's how his business takes off. So that's something I think I want to put into the room. The second one I want to put into the room is, Dauphin, your comment on civil society. And I'm glad that you said civil society as we know it. But what is civil society? Civil society is actually citizens who organize themselves to make a difference where they are. And even when we think of NGOs as we know it, who are NGOs? NGOs are groups that get together and then say, we want to devote our life full time. I want to spend my entire time doing this. And therefore, I need to organize myself into an organization. I need to get funding. I need to set up systems. I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, what's going on in the energy sector around ordinary citizens, whether they are organizing in groups as a formal NGO, or in the story, what you'll see is that these are people who are organizing into networks. And I think the other thing we haven't put into the room yet is, what would an energy movement look like? Because a movement isn't necessarily only NGOs. NGOs may be part of it, but a movement may be business people like this guy and people working in government. And it was a deliberate choice to put his wife working in local government. And it's people organizing as a movement, finding other like-minded people who I think may be the kind of change that we need. And I see the beginnings of a movement right there in the room. And then the final comment I also wanted to make was this question of what does politics look like? And I think in the earlier stories, we see a model of the greedy politician who will make choices, who will put a policy because it serves their interests. And really in this story, what you see is a young person who doesn't have the money, but finds a different way of doing politics. And she actually starts at home. She starts with the grassroots, if you want, county level politics. This is an MCA who organizes using the people in her movement, and then says, we must take this change that we've made on our county level, we must take it back to the city. Because at the end of the day, what's happening in the county governments must be connected to the national governments. And what's happening at national government level must be connected to county government level. And I think this question of governance and how we can influence change around issues is another one that we need to put on the table. Just this week, national government flying cabinet secretaries all around the country to plant trees. And yet there are county commissioners in each of those counties, there are governors, there are governance structures in those counties. So assuming that we thought the planting trees initiative was important, it was a priority, it was crucial, it needed to happen now for all sorts of reasons. The question is, why is there this disconnect that national government must spend millions and millions, if not billions of money, doing this nationwide effort that could just be done grassroots up? So let me let me stop there. But I'm loving the discussion, because I think when we bring our different thoughts together, for everybody who speaks, I just think, oh my God, that's such a great point. And this is how we can take this forward. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mshai. I was actually going to call you later on because I think you're the only senior member of our team who is with us today. So Dr. Mshai was the editor of the Energy for Whom, the Scenarios for Eastern Africa, and a very critical part of the team. And with those insights, we're really, really grateful. So basically what I'm taking from what Dr. Mshai said is actually the solutions that need to inspire us to the next step of what needs to be done is actually just in front of us. How do we organize? How do we create a movement? How do we find those solutions from within ourselves and then plug them back to society? So thanks for that, Dr. Mshai. There were 2 more hands, and then I want to wrap us up because I can smell some lunch already. So yes, we'll go with you. And please just remind us our names, your name.
Okay, my name is Joshua Odur from Strathmore. I just have like 3 questions that we should carry with us as we leave. So the first one is, will future discussions on the transformation of the African Sustainable Development be there? And the other one is, will we witness a leapfrogging to new technologies as it was seen in the telecommunications industry and also the solar industry? We saw the trajectory of how it grew. And finally, is that will we deals were happening? We from the end of the Africa Climate Summit, we had different declarations from the government and also international stakeholders, but where the actual deals are going to happen is in the side events. So maybe that is my take and from the conversation that we have been having.
Jacob, was there a last one? Because I want to nudge a few people who have not had their voices. You had one, didn't you?
Okay, I'm Calvin Rock from African Sense. And so I just wanted to highlight to underscore the need for collaboration. Duncan had mentioned it. I believe scientists and journalists and civil society organizations need to work really closely together, especially when it comes to, in general, science stories. We all talked about how technical science is, and of course, science operates incrementally. So working together will make it easier for them to disseminate these stories to the public. Well, the way it happens, from what I've experienced, is that journalists consume crumbs from the table of scientists, and then the public consumes crumbs from the table of journalists, and then there are all those people in between. Needs to be a collaboration such that what the public gets is what the scientists intended. Secondly, there's also the issue of trends in the in the influencer generation that we are in. Many media houses look at numbers, which in many cases translate to financial gain. So the reason why a politician will get coverage and not a scientist talking about climate change is because the masses will perhaps want to hear what the politician has to say than what the scientist has to say. I think this should change, particularly because of the stereotype that science is technical and difficult and all that. There was an Oxford report last year in June about how people access and their interest in climate change news. I think if you read the report, you'll get a whole picture of what I'm talking about. So if there's even the slightest of ways that we can change the perspective of the masses, those who understand something about climate change, about conservation, about the environment, about energy, about any science topic, if there's the slightest of way that we can change the perspective of the people, that is where we really need to put more effort so that the audiences also get to know the essence of the stories we do. Yeah, thank you.
I want to wrap us off, but I'm wondering if there's one more voice. Can I pick on you to close for us with your thoughts and comments on everything you've seen and heard today?
Okay, I'm Melissa, and the last episode was interesting on the struggles, and like I've seen, we can see the way the man retired. The way the man retired and went back home to use his skills. So we are all like encouraged to at least use our skills better, to try to innovate something from what we have, so that at least we don't depend on the things that are being imported for us to use. They are not here to stay. They will be soon. They will perish soon. So, and again, we can say that the news is only depending on the prominent people, like they're the people who make news, but we can at least try to, like he has said, try to make people understand that it's not about politics, or if that particular politician says this, that is what is news. No, even the people, the vulnerable people, are people who make news peer. So we should try to engage them and at least make them know that we are all people who can make news. Yeah, we have stories to tell.
Thank you. So we've talked. That has been amazing. I'm sure there's so many more things we want to say, but we'll save it for the next Public Energy Futures Forum, because this is a series. It happens all the time, and after there are new things that have happened or developments, we always want to bring people together to digest, unpack, demystify, understand, share. So there's more and more of this, so be looking out for communications when the next one will be coming. I want to just wrap up this segment with a slide from the struggle story that I think kind of summarize what we've all said. And Bakisa, I see your hand, so I will give you an opportunity. I just want to share this last slide. If you can see it. No, it moved. So it's this slide. And in this slide, I think this is the last thing I want us to focus on. What is enough and what really matters to us as we're leaving the room today? Just think about it. Is it a big house or a small house? Is it many children or only 2? Lots of people are talking about where we are now and what's more important. And I hear a lot of conversations about how many children should we have or not. On that other side, a very good question. What's more important? More things? Buying more things? And we have a picture there of all the things you could buy with your money, or a clean and healthy river or environment if you want. And then what else matters? What really matters? Is it the ability to own or the ability to share? So I think this is what I'd like to leave you guys with as we wrap up the forum for today. And because Emily is not here to wrap us off, she was supposed to close us off. I think I will do that. I'll do the vote of thanks. Thank you, everybody, for being here. A special thank you to the members of the Energy Reference Group, the current members of the Energy Reference Group, for the expert knowledge, research, conversations, the things we do in workshop that allow us to gather enough information to have these public forums. So just thanking the members of the Energy Reference Group. Big thank you to Heinrich Böll Foundation for financing us to be able to do this. Resources are very, very important, and we're looking to do bigger, partner, empower different actors so that we can all get to a place where we're contributing to some level. A big, big thank you to Chomoka Studios. I don't think when we were doing these animations together before COVID, we were just doing it because, you know, we wanted to highlight what that future might look like. But we are appreciating it very much more now because the things that came out in these scenarios, as Dr. Muchai said, are really coming out now, even for us as Kenyans, as Africans. And I always say that the Energy for Home is a booklet and a tool, not just for Kenya, not just for East Africans, but for the entire African continent. The carbon markets initiatives is a big deal. We're going to global climate negotiations. Africa's position in those negotiations is very critical and very important, not just for the leadership, but for the citizens of this continent. And so using that as a tool and as a guide to frame where we want to be, the kind of negotiations we want to have, the kind of transitions we need, the kind of actions we need at all levels of engagement is very important. So a huge thank you to Chomoka Studios for partnering with us to produce these animations in the face of COVID. It was not easy then, for those of you who remember. So a huge thank you to Chomoka Studios. I want to also say a big thank you to my team that I'm here with. So I work together with an incredible team that includes Iman, Crispus, Emily, Helen, Arthur, in absentia. Just a huge thank you because these are the people who we work together in the back end. I want to thank the artists in the room. And today we have Dofan. Dofan is an artist who writes about social issues that are affecting the community. He picks up things that we missed out in history and he brings it out as Kenyans. And I want to appreciate him because when he invited him to this space, he really took it up and he's ended up creating pieces that speak to the issues that we speak of today. So for us, it's how do we include expertise and actors who more often than not, we don't think are relevant to these spaces, but in actual sense, they are. And then I want to close by thanking Strathmore University. We had reached out to Strathmore to partner with us to convene this forum. And we want to thank you for always being the academic institution that's willing to step up and come and share the knowledge that we have together. So those are the vote of thanks. So wait, I've not finished. Online community, I did not forget you. My apologies. Thank you for joining and for being active participants. And we hope that you will be with us physically on the next one. So asanteni sana. Finally, there are some sticky notes that are going around in the room. So I want us to close with a little exercise, and I hope you have a pen and a book on you. If you don't, just raise your hand. We have a bucket full of markers and pencils and crayons and things like that that you can use. So just keep your hand up and Emily will come with a big bucket of pens and give it to you. So you have a pink sticky note. On the pink sticky note, I'd like you to highlight just 3 issues or 3 concerns that we really should move forward as a community of practice when it comes to Kenya's energy system and Kenya's energy and climate future, not system. Just 3 top things, 3 things that we should really pay close attention to as a community of practice. So a community of practice is everybody in this room and everybody who has interacted in this project and every Kenyan who is affected by energy and climate in any way. Just 3 top things on the red one. And for our online community, please type them out on the chat box. We will need your insights as well. 3 major things that this community of practice should move forward with for us to really cement that desirable energy and climate future. 3 things. On the green sticky note, I'd like you to write solutions or that action. The first action should be the action that you are going to take as an individual actor in shaping a desirable energy and climate future for our country. The last two should be actions for us in the room or actors that are missing here. So if you think there are actors who play a critical role, what is that recommendation or action that they need to take? It could be government, it could be private sector, it could be academia, it could be the creative sector, it could be youth, the agency of youth, it could be county governments, the MCAs. So, and just put it there, because we will take these things you write and implement them. So that's a green sticky note. On the yellow sticky note, I'd like you to just write, it could be a quote or a comment or anything. How useful did you find the energy animations, the energy for whom animations in provoking the conversations we've had today? So you can say, very useful, but then leave a comment. We just want your reviews on how useful this is and whether we should do more screenings of the animations with other screening companies, organizations, such as the one we're in today. So I think that's clear. And then you really have to write, because we are collective before we can go for lunch together. And I am waiting for the Zoom chat to start pinging crazy, because I know you're there and you can hear me. Great. While we're doing that, Dolphin is going to close us off with one of his creative pieces. So when he's done writing, he will be coming to close us off at some point. Emily, is there anything we need to know? Okay, great. And a huge thank you to Unseen, even though there's no representative here. This venue, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Unseen. I personally like the work they do. They usually film, they usually show different screenings of different things, but they usually anchored on human rights issues, things that really get you thinking about social justice, human rights. And so it felt like the best location to bring this very small dialogue that we were having today. So big, big thank you to Unseen, and let them continue to do the work that they do. When you're having lunch, they also have a very nice view, so you get to see Kilimani from an aerial view and what's happening out there. So this is me just spending time for you to finish. And as Dolphin comes up, lunch is being served, so please do not leave without grabbing something to eat. And with that, we will see you at the next Public Energy Futures Forum. My name is Pasi, and it was nice being your host with Iman today. Dolphin.
Thank you again. I think this was very informative and engaging. And I think I will try to end it on that note of community, because I feel like there's a lot we can learn, not just through this, but through our communities. And so this is called grandmother's ritual, and these are a few lessons I've learned from my grandmother, and also like living in a rural setup, and a few lessons I feel like we can all learn and utilize as a society and community. And as an energy movement, as Mushai has branded us, Jojo ngweka kego, Jojo ngweka kego, Kiama konkoni na manyenje, Kiama konkoni na manyenje, Ndoya sheuma ngago taire, Ndoya sheuma ngago taire, Jojo. My grandmother has a ritual. Each time I travel to the countryside, she unlocks a granary and packs a bag of groceries for my return. She does this for my 3 cousins, all my distant relatives, and for each visiting guest. In test, I always make an attempt to decline, but she's ever intent in keeping this olden tradition. Iriobi riobia kungana. Nantereka weta kurero impara Nairobi. There is more than enough here, and I will not have you starving in the city. In December 2022, my visit came on the wake of a 3-year-long drought. I could tell of the empty racks in her store, but the fact that she didn't bother to lock the door. And as sad as that was, a part of me was glad that this time she will not have to trouble herself. This time she won't have to raid her stock to aid my costly lonesome existence in a rented city flat. But on the eve of my departure, she looked from across the table and said, I sent a boda to buy you some potatoes and tomatoes from the market. Aware of the futility of my efforts, I tried to air my objection, but a defeated smile is all I could muster when she added, you need the food much more than I need the money. I've been thinking about that a lot. How the world needs people like my grandmother. How I've learned to value people from my grandmother. How our seemingly misplaced tradition could possibly be the vision for our future, with the signs signaling of dire days and science warning of a much warming globe. My grandmother's ritual is like a breath of fresh air, a gust of moist winds floating over bare arid plains, eager for restoration. Whatever the cost, she's glad to pay. Like a distant seasonal storm flooding a desolate riverbed, my grandmother's ritual summons our collective sense with each visit. Perhaps just to remind us that no grain of soil, however rich and fertile, is enough on its own. Or perhaps through our relentless efforts to keep our community together, to teach us that the challenge is insurmountable. Sometimes all you need is a familiar tradition and a barn packed with groceries, and maybe, just maybe, a little money in your pockets. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. It's been a pleasure.
Fun. And with that, I officially invite you all to lunch. Please network, meet somebody who you don't know. You never know what you might learn from them. Networking is very important. So we're going to have lunch and networking now, and then you can leave at your own leisure. Asanteni sana, and have a good rest of the day. Our online community, thank you so much. And we are looking forward to having you in the room during the next forum, as I already said. Enjoy your lunch as well and the rest of your afternoon. Until we meet again, kwaheri.